Chapter 41-59. It was no wonder that during the era of the gods, the will of the world could fight against the gods. It turned out that the will of the world was really terrifying. However, this had nothing to do with Lin Ling. To put it bluntly, Lin Ling was fighting against the spirit nation for his own sake. He did not have the heart to worry about the world. You stopped the awakening of the great gods of the spirit nation? Lin Ling, Longyang, Little South, you have done a great service. I didn't expect Xianxia to be so close to betraying the gods. Damn it! The four gods already know about this matter. You can go back now. You have successfully completed this mission. I estimate that this mission will allow you to increase your level by 1 star. Especially you, Lin Ling. You were originally a 5-star god of heaven sound. Now, you will definitely reach 6-star. Congratulations. Congratulations. The 4 experts smiled and said. The deity king of the east even bowed to Lin Ling. He looked extremely polite. Although he was stronger than Lin Ling was still a trial taker. In the future, it was very likely that he would take over the Great Hall of Lei Gong. Therefore he had to be respectful. He was a divine general. In fact, he was also a trial taker. However, he had failed many trial missions and was eventually eliminated. This matter is too important. We will go first. You can go back by yourselves. After that, they did not dare to stay. After cupping their hands to Lin Ling and the others, they immediately disappeared. All right. Lin Ling bowed slightly to the 4 of them. Looking at the endless void in the distance, his body finally relaxed. This mission was full of twists and turns and took a long time. It was beyond imagination. Fortunately, Lin Ling had completed everything he wanted to do. The Creation Alliance and the Serpent Clan were also saved by Lin Ling. During this mission, Lin Ling's strength had improved by leaps and bounds. He had entered the ranks of the 9 continents Titans. Of course, the result seemed to be perfect. In fact, Lin Ling had risked his life to get it back. Lin Ling, it's time for me to go back. While Lin Ling was sighing, Longyang suddenly walked over and cupped her hands towards Lin Ling. Thanks to you, I have successfully completed my mission. I will return this favor to you in the future. However, don't think that our grudge is over. Looking at Lin Ling with a complicated expression, Longyang's eyes flashed with killing intent. That's for the best. If you gave up that battle out of gratitude, I would look down on you instead. Lin Ling immediately nodded lightly. I'll take Little South with me first. She's still in a coma. We can only ask the Curishin to take a look at her after we return. But I think she's fine. On the contrary, her status has been raised because of this mission. Longyang held Little South in her right hand, glanced at Lin Ling again, and flew off into the distance. Let's go. Seeing Longyang disappear, Lin Ling smiled and said to the tens of thousands of experts behind him. He strode into the void, and the experts behind him followed step by step. There was no doubt that this group of people would have another identity from now on. They would be members of the God Slayer Alliance. If Lin Ling raised his arms and shouted, countless experts in the final world would support Lin Ling. In addition to the God Slayer Alliance, Lin Ling was now a giant in the final world that could not be provoked. He even dared to face the 9 states' top 10 martial gods head-on. After leaving this realm, Lin Ling and Lu Chen continued to move forward. Senior Lu Chen, what are your plans now? Lin Ling asked. Lu Chen looked at the Creation Alliance and the Orochi clan behind him, then sighed and said, the Spirit Nation has treated us as traitors. They will definitely not let this go. So, for the time being, I'm afraid we have nowhere to go. Why don't you go to Jianghu first? That's my territory, and Lei Gong's experts are secretly guarding it. If anything happens, Lei Gong and I will be the first to know, and we will definitely come to help you. Lin Ling suggested. All right, since we can't go anywhere for the time being, let's go to Jianghu. Lu Chen nodded immediately, then flew in the void for a long time. When Jianghu gradually came into view, he led the Creation Alliance and left. In the blink of an eye, only the experts who had assimilated with Lin Ling were left behind. You guys should go back as well, Lin Ling said to these people. All right, if my lord needs anything, just say the word, and we will rush over immediately. These experts all saluted Lin Ling. In their hearts, Lin Ling was their king. Then, they dispersed and disappeared into the vast void. The originally lively surroundings suddenly became quiet. Lin Ling was not used to this. He looked at the giant ghost beside him and asked, "Did you discover anything during the battle with Xianxia's giant ghost?" Helping the giant ghost find its origin was a promise that Lin Ling had made to the giant ghost. So, Lin Ling was very concerned about this matter. "I've awakened some memories, but if I really want to know everything, I might have to return to the 8 gods' heavenly palace." The giant ghost's eyes looked into the distance with a complicated expression. Lin Ling looked at the giant ghost with a smile and said, "You obtained the map of the 7th level of the 8 gods' heavenly palace at the last auction. Once everything is settled, let's go to the 8 gods' heavenly palace." The giant ghost also looked at Lin Ling, and its eyes flickered. It seemed to be moved, but it did not say anything. "You've been with me for so long, but you're still so arrogant." Lin Ling could not help but chide it. "Compared to the 8 gods' heavenly palace, you should think of a way to deal with the energy in your body first. Anyway, you won't die, so there will be a way to deal with it. However, I never thought that an evil ghost like you would care about others." Bullshit! One man and one ghost walked through the void. To Lin Ling, the giant ghost had accompanied him as he grew up, and the two of them roamed the strange lands together. Their relationship was extraordinary. Although the giant ghost represented evil, Lin Ling felt that it was not evil at all. Instead, it had emotions like a human. Perhaps, this was something that the 8 gods did not expect. "Although I've gained a lot from this mission, I've also inadvertently been involved in an ancient deity storm." As they walked, Lin Ling sighed. After the incident in the Spirit Nation, Lin Ling realized how insignificant he was. An existence like the great god of the Spirit Nation could kill him, Lin Ling, with just a finger. There was no need for the great god of the Spirit Nation. As long as Lord Ning took action, Lin Ling would not be able to fight back. This made Lin Ling curious. During the era of the gods, how many experts were there, and how terrifying their strength was? Although you got involved in a storm, at least your strength has improved by leaps and bounds. The time needed for this is not even enough for 10 years. Be content, the giant ghost said from the side. Lin Ling nodded. To a warrior in the martial god realm, 10 years was just the blink of an eye. However, in these 10 years, Lin Ling had broken through 2 levels and even created 6 divine fetuses. Such progress was a pleasant surprise to anyone. Chapter 4160. Lin Ling, you have completed the mission this time. Lei Gong will definitely reward you greatly. When the time comes, let's see if there is any way to solve the hidden danger in your body. After all, although this hidden danger is not life-threatening, it is not good to leave it in your body. After Lin Ling disappeared for a long time, the void also flowed like water waves. A figure quietly appeared, looking in the direction they left with a faint smile. Trial taker Lin Ling. His strength is now comparable to the city lord of E City. What a crazy growth of the younger generation. Such a god, the Spirit Nation must not miss. This person was Lord Ning. He knew very well that after Lin Ling's disruption, the Spirit Nation's great god was not angry. Instead, he praised Lin Ling and Lord Ning. Of course, the Spirit Nation's great god's purpose was to obtain Lin Ling, a fierce general, by any means possible. Let Lin Ling, a once powerful god, return to his position. At this moment, Lin Ling's strength had greatly increased, so it did not take long for him to return to the final world. This made Lin Ling very happy. For the past few years, he had been trapped in the void of Spirit Light City. It was like being in prison. So, when he returned to the final world, he immediately felt like he had returned from prison. Snow-blowing city. Without stopping, Lin Ling brought the giant ghost and quickly shot towards Snow-blowing city. Snow-blowing city could only be considered as a mid-tier city among the 36 main cities. This was the change in the past 100 years. In the past, Snow-blowing city was at the bottom of the 36 main cities. There were even signs of it falling to the level of a secondary city. However, with the rise of Lin Ling, these signs obviously did not exist anymore. At this moment, on the ancient road leading to Snow-blowing city, a large number of experts smiled and walked forward. If one looked carefully, the weakest of these experts were at the late stage of the martial god realm. There were even some at the peak of the martial god realm. Their temperament was extraordinary, and their every move carried the temperament of a superior person. This was because they were the city lords of the various cities. Among them, There were 8 city lords from the 36 main cities and 29 city lords from the 72 secondary cities. Their purpose was naturally to go to Snow-Blowing City to listen to the orders of the gods. Not long ago, the gods suddenly issued an order for the nearby city lords to go to the 4 main cities to discuss important matters. Among the 4 main cities, one of them was Snow-Blowing City. Therefore, all the city lords near Snow-Blowing City had gathered there. And for Snow-Blowing City, this was obviously a great honor. After all, to let the city lords of each city come in person and be the host, their status was like a cut above the others. This made the city lords' dissatisfaction. A trial tester named Lin Ling has appeared in Snow City. Therefore, Xianxia's status has also risen. It must be Lin Ling otherwise, with Snow-Blowing City? Hee, it's not that I'm looking down on him, but how could he have the qualifications to gather us city lords? He can only be a runner. However, this god's order seems to be extremely urgent. I'm afraid something big is about to happen. These city lords talked as they walked. From their words, it could be seen that they were disdainful of Snow-Blowing City. I heard that the trial tester Lin Ling is very powerful. Among the 36 main cities, 80% of the people are no match for him. As for the 72 secondary cities, I'm afraid only 1 or 2 people can fight against him. At this moment, one of the young city lords suddenly said with a smile, "City Lord Yang, do you also think Lin Ling is very strong?" Someone next to him asked curiously. "Whether he's strong or not, I don't know. But just based on his identity as a trial taker, he's higher than us." Sigh, comparisons are odious. Some people's luck is extremely good when they're born. The young city lord shook his head and said. He seemed to be in awe of Lin Ling, but there was a touch of jealousy in his words. He seemed to think that Lin Ling could become a trial tester because of luck. But he did not have such luck. I also agree with City Lord Yang's words. Another city lord said. He was also very young. Obviously, they were masters of the 36 academies. Because of their strength and talent, they had become the city lords of the 36 main cities. Originally, they thought they were young and promising. After all, it was a very glorious thing to become a city lord at such a young age. However, when it came to Lin Ling, they immediately dimmed like fireflies. Forget it. They have a god as their backer. They have a very strong background, while we have nothing. We can only rely on ourselves. Yes, there is an old saying in the final world. Unless you have the strength to change everything, background and relationships are extremely important. Now, I deeply understand this saying. The other city lords also said one after another. It's useless to say more. At present, we'd better do our job well. I just don't know if Xianxia is arrogant or not. I hope he won't use Lin Ling's name to show off. How dare he? Don't blame me for teaching him a lesson. Speaking of Xianxia, the city lord said with disdain. He only relies on Lin Ling's name. Otherwise, he would be nothing in the 36 main cities. The youngest city lord snorted disdainfully at this moment. Lin Ling was a trial taker, so he did not dare to provoke him casually. However, he did not care about Xianxia, who was of similar status. A moment later, a huge city quietly appeared in front of them. Obviously, it was Snow City. However, when they were heading to Snow City, a figure also flew over their heads. This caused the city lords to frown, and they were a little unhappy. These city lords were like the kings of the final world. They had always been the ones flying over other people's heads. Since when had they ever had their heads stepped on by others? How dare you? The young city lord called Yang waved his arm, and a gust of wind raged in the sky. City Lord Yang, this is the area near Snow City. Don't act rashly. Seeing this, a city lord immediately advised. So what? Snow City knows that we are coming, but they still let people fly at will. Obviously, they don't take us seriously. I am teaching them a lesson. City Lord Yang snorted coldly. I think so too. When the other city lords heard City Lord Yang's words, they also felt that it was reasonable. Originally, when they were going to Snow-Blowing City for a gathering, they already felt inferior. Now that they saw someone being so rude, it made them feel even more unhappy. Now, seeing City Lord Yang teaching that rude person a lesson, they naturally agreed. It could be regarded as another way to vent their anger. They also wanted to let Snow-Blowing City know that they, the city lords, had come and Snow-Blowing City would welcome their arrival. Whoosh! The wind raged in the sky, but the warrior waved his sleeve and the wind immediately dispersed. Then, the warrior floated in the distant sky and looked at the group of people on the ground indifferently. This also made the city lords realize that the warrior was wearing a blue and white robe and was extremely young. It seems that he is Lin Ling. Suddenly, someone exclaimed. Chapter 4161. However, the man in the blue robe who was floating in the sky did not say anything. He strode forward and ran towards Snow City again. He easily broke Mayor Yang's attack. His strength is absolutely amazing. Coupled with the blue robe, it is very likely that he is Lin Ling. Sigh. Looking at the man leaving, the other city lords frowned and said. As for City Lord Yang, his expression changed a bit. Then he let out a cold snort and said, So what if it's Lin Ling? Do you think he dares to touch me? Sigh. Let's go to Snow City. Sigh. After saying that, he strode forward. Although he wasn't sure if that person was Lin Ling, he had already done what he shouldn't have done. He, Yonggang, was not going to be a coward. Moreover, Lin Ling was famous, but he had always been unconvinced. After all, he was the top master in the third hall of Wuwei College. Lin Ling was just a guy who relied on luck to get to the top. Even if it is Lin Ling, Mayor Yang is not afraid of him. Lin Ling relies on the support of the gods. In terms of strength, Mayor Yang is above him. Sigh. The other city lords looked at each other and then headed towards Snow City, led by Mayor Yang. At this moment, a large number of strong men gathered at the gate of Snow City. The leader was Xianxia. His eyes looked forward with a touch of dissatisfaction. My lord, according to the time, they should have come early in the morning, but we have waited until noon. Next to him, an old man frowned and said. Not long ago, the city lord mansion received an order from the gods, saying that the city lords of the nearby cities would gather in Snow City. Xianxia naturally did not dare to neglect this. This was the first time that Snow City had greeted those city lords as a host. Different from the last college exchange, it was a great honor for Snow City to have all the city lords come. However, when he greeted those city lords politely, they had been waiting for a whole morning. With the strength of those city lords, according to the time, they should not have taken so long to arrive. Obviously, those city lords were deliberately taking their time to suppress Xianxia's prestige. Those city lords are dissatisfied with your lordship's sudden rise in power and the importance of the gods. The old man beside him also knew this and spoke in a rather displeased manner. Xianxia squinted his eyes and said, I don't mind. What I'm afraid of is that the gods have an important task. If they come here lazily and delay the task, it will be difficult to report back to the gods. The old man nodded. And when the time comes, all the fault will be pushed onto you. It's really a group of guys who can't see the situation clearly. Do they still think that our snow-blowing city is the same as it was in the past? Xianxia snorted coldly. At this moment, a figure dashed over from afar. Currently, in the area of snow-blowing city, because they wanted to welcome the various city lords, the cultivators were not allowed to fly. They could only walk as a sign of respect to the city lords. Therefore, when someone flew over proudly, it naturally attracted countless gazes. My lord, look, that looks like it. The old man next to him was angry at first, but then he suddenly became ecstatic. It's Lin Ling. He's back. Xianxia rubbed his eyes and a smile appeared on his face. He naturally knew that Lin Ling had gone to do a trial task, but he never expected that in just a few years, Lin Ling would come back. Go and inform my senior sister. By the way, inform Snow-Blowing Academy and you as well. Xianxia hurriedly said to the old man next to him. Okay. The old man nodded excitedly. Now he knew that the young man had become the representative of Snow-Blowing City. Because of the young man's rise, Snow-Blowing City's reputation among the 36 and 72 cities was not low. Senior Tsong. Not long after, Lin Ling landed at the city gate and then looked at Xianxia with a smile. Haha, Lin Ling, you're finally back. Xianxia laughed and came in front of Lin Ling and gave Lin Ling a punch on his chest. Back then, when he had found out that Lin Ling was a trial taker, he had given Lin Ling enough help. So many years had passed, and Lin Ling had not let him down. She had completely become the heavenly voice of God and had even become his superior. He clearly knew that because of Lin Ling's existence, Snow-Blowing City had been worry-free for thousands of years. Even a god would not easily change Snow-Blowing City. You're back. Is Snow-Blowing City all right? Lin Ling also gave Xianxia a punch on his chest. Even though his current status was higher than Xianxia's, he was still Lin Ling and did not bully others. It should be known that after becoming the heavenly voice of God, in the final world, all the city lords were lower than Lin Ling. Moreover, among all the trial testers, only the heavenly voice of God was qualified to talk to Lin Ling. When other trial testers saw Lin Ling, they had to call him Big Brother. Not to mention the holy knights and messengers of God. When they saw Lin Ling, they all had to salute him. Only the great general of God, whose status was equal to Lin Ling's. Haha, you have a terrible senior in your family. How could anything happen? 2 years ago, in fact, there were experts who secretly sneaked into Snow-Blowing City. It seemed that they wanted to investigate something, but they were all thrown out of the city by that senior. After this incident, Snow-Blowing City has been peaceful. Xianxia said. Lin Ling knew that the senior must be treasure god Nanwu Fengyu. Nanwu Fengyu had indeed protected Snow-Blowing City in the past few years. Brother Ling. At this time, a large number of people came running from Snow-Blowing City. The fastest ones were undoubtedly Yu Yu, and Yuer, and Shen Yuan Guer. When they saw Lin Ling, their faces were obviously relaxed. Obviously, they were very worried about Lin Ling going to Spirit Kingdom to save Lu Chen. Fortunately, Lin Ling had once again overcome all the hardships he had to endure. Yu Yu Yuer Guer. When Lin Ling saw his wives, his heart was filled with nostalgia. He strode forward and hugged his 3 beautiful wives in his arms. Everyone smiled as they watched this scene, but they did not interrupt. That's trial tester Lin Ling? Wow, I've heard of his name for a long time. Today, I finally have the chance to meet him. So handsome, and it seems that his strength is very strong. Haha, this is an expert from our Snow-Blowing Academy, the representative of our Snow-Blowing Academy. Far away on the street, a large number of Snow-Blowing Academy students stared at Lin Ling with burning admiration in their eyes. Some of the good-looking women's hearts were beating violently at this moment. If it were not for the beautiful women in Lin Ling's arms, they would have almost given him a flirtatious look. However, Lin Ling's 3 beautiful wives each had their own characteristics. They were all beautiful women. Compared to Yu Yu and the others, these women felt a little inferior. Dad. Grandpa. At this moment, Lin Yi and the others walked out with Lin Ling's granddaughter in tow. Linger. Brother Ling. Ancestor Tai Yan and treasure god Nanwu Fengyu also came out with Xiao Yu and the others. Chapter 4162. Everyone immediately nodded. They stared at this tall man with deep admiration in the depths of their eyes. This was because they knew that this man had used his seemingly weak body to block all the storms and tribulations, allowing them to gain a foothold in the final world. Then, young Master Monster and the others appeared one after another. Regardless of whether they were in seclusion or adventuring outside, they all rushed back at once. Even outside Snow City, a large number of experts from the God Slayer Alliance appeared. The various leaders looked at Lin Ling from afar, their hearts filled with joy. Without a doubt, the commotion caused by Lin Ling's return was huge. It was like pulling one hair and affecting the whole body. After all, in the final world, Lin Ling was now a famous person. Looking at the crowd, Lin Ling roughly told them what he had seen in the Spirit Nation, especially to young Master Monster and Majin Tianzi. Hearing this, young Master Monster and the others' faces changed. They had not expected their fierce forces to join the Spirit Nation, and behind the Spirit Nation was the will of the final world. Lin Ling this. Young Master Monster and Majin Tianzi were in a difficult position. They are them, and we are us. So, it's not a big problem. Lin Ling naturally knew why they were in a difficult position. They were afraid that the ancient goblin tribe would become Lin Ling's enemy in the future. That's right. They are them and we are us. We are from the God Slayer Alliance. Young Master Monster pondered for a moment, then nodded with a smile. The ancient goblin tribe joining the Spirit Nation was their problem, but young Master Monster was from the God Slayer Alliance, and that was enough. It seems that the deities have gathered here to talk about the Spirit Nation. Xianxia immediately guessed after hearing Lin Ling's words. I think so too. Lin Ling nodded. The Spirit Nation is recruiting experts everywhere, so the deities will interrupt them. Now that they have spread the news, it must be to warn people in advance and not to join the Spirit Nation. I didn't expect the Spirit Nation to be so powerful. Song Chiri and the old woman looked at each other, their eyes solemn. Then, they stared at Lin Ling and shook their heads in disbelief. Back in the day, Lin Ling was very weak and didn't have the qualifications to know many secrets of the era of gods. But now, Lin Ling was already the spokesperson of the gods. He knew more things than they did and could do things in the name of the gods. Oh, it's so lively! Right at this moment, a large number of people finally walked in from the enormous city gates. They were the city lords of the various cities. They were obviously surprised. Originally, they thought that Song Chiri and the others were here to welcome them, so they were happy. Song Chiri knew how to do things. However, after entering Snow City, they found that these people were not here to welcome them at all. Even if they did not speak, no one would know that they had come. This undoubtedly made them very unhappy. Song Chiri, is this how you treat your guests? Don't you know that we're here on behalf of the gods? If you neglect us, it's the same as neglecting the gods. One of the young men suddenly shouted with great majesty, as if he were Song Chiri's immediate superior. This voice undoubtedly interrupted Lin Ling and attracted the attention of many people at the same time. That seems to be Yonggang? There were many experts present, and one or two people recognized the young man, the strongest expert of the Shenzhen Hall of Wuwei College. When they finished speaking, the faces of the students in the college changed greatly. Wuwei College was ranked third among the 36 colleges and was even more powerful than the E-Garden. How could a young expert who could become the strongest in this college be weak? It could be said that 90% of the people in the 36 colleges were no match for this person alone. If this person had come to Snow Wind College in the past, people would have been flattered and their eyes would have been opened. However, there was one more person above Yonggang, Lin Ling naturally. Yonggang seemed to be a lot dimmer. City Lord Yong, what do you mean by this? Seeing Yonggang's rudeness, Song Chiri felt a little embarrassed. He, Song Chiri, was a city lord. Although he was not as good as Yonggang, he was at least half of Yonggang's senior. Yonggang did not give him any face at all. What do you mean? I'm asking you, what do you mean? Didn't you receive the god's order? Before Yonggang could speak, another young man next to him spoke. This person was called Lin Xiao, the second strongest expert of the E-Garden Shenzhen Hall. He was also the most outstanding person in the college. Of course, compared to Yonggang, he was naturally a lot dimmer. After all, Yonggang was also ranked 50th on the Stairway of Heaven on the Divine List. Then do you know how long I've been waiting? I've been waiting since morning. You said I neglected the god's order, but I think you're the ones who neglected the god's order. Song Chiri was so angry that his voice was like a firecracker. He glanced around, and the city lords under the gate did not dare to look directly at him, because they were in the wrong. According to the rules, they should have rushed over immediately. However, Yonggang was walking slowly, which caused them to slow down as well. Humph! We came from all the main cities. Do you think we can get here in a day? If you're so powerful, why don't you come to my main city? However, Yonggang was still not afraid of Song Chiri. Hearing this, Song Chiri could not hold back anymore. He took a step forward, but Lin Ling stopped him and looked at Yonggang calmly. Yonggang also looked at Lin Ling. Naturally, he recognized Lin Ling as the man in the blue robe from before. He also guessed that the man in the blue robe was Lin Ling. Phoenix's eye. Then he shouted. His eyes suddenly turned pitch black and his pupils changed. They did not look like the eyes of a human, but the eyes of a phoenix. Strangely, he could see Lin Ling's cultivation stage through the phoenix's eye. It was extremely rude to check someone's cultivation stage rashly, which made the eyes of young Master Yao and the others extremely cold. However, Lin Ling waved his hand indifferently. He believed that Yonggang could not see through Lin Ling's cultivation stage. Fourth level of the martial god realm. At this moment, Yonggang let out a long voice that was mixed with a wisp of disdain. Is that all? Beside him, Lin Xiao also laughed mockingly. They were both at the peak of the martial god realm, but Lin Ling was only at the fourth level of the martial god realm. Although Lin Ling was famous, they thought Lin Ling was only a... If Lin Ling did not have a strong background, he would be weaker than them. I've been waiting for you for a long time. At this moment, Lin Ling finally spoke. Waiting for us? Yonggang squinted his eyes and looked indifferent. First in the Shenzhen Hall of Wuwei College, right? What's your ranking on the stairway to heaven? Linling asked again. 52nd. Chapter 4163. Not too bad. How about this? You're barely qualified to fight me. If you win, you can do whatever you want. Linling nodded. If you lose, you'll have to do whatever you want. His voice was calm, but it carried a domineering aura. Not too bad. Yonggang sneered. What do you mean by that? It's simple. If you're only ranked 80th or 90th on the stairway to heaven, I'm sorry, but you're not even qualified to fight me. If you're ranked 52nd, you're barely qualified. Linling said calmly. However, to Yonggang's ears, it sounded like he was looking down on him. Shameless boasting. Before Yonggang could speak, Lin Xiao shouted angrily. That was because he was not ranked 52nd. Did that mean that he was not even qualified to fight Linling? Although he had heard that Linling had defeated the city governor, he did not think that Linling was much stronger than him. Moreover, he was no match for Yonggang. However, before he could say anything, Yonggang had already stopped him. All right, I'll fight you. Yonggang was obviously looking forward to this battle. He had heard of Linling's name and had always wanted to learn from him. In his opinion, not every trial taker was strong. As far as he knew, the trial taker's circle was very unbalanced. The strong ones had heaven-defying strength while the weak ones were even weaker than them. He guessed that Linling had not been a trial taker for long and should be a weak trial taker. Therefore, he would teach Linling a lesson today. Boom! Yonggang unleashed all of his boundary essence. He was at the peak of the martial god realm and was just a little bit away from breaking through to the martial god realm. Of course, although the gap did not seem big, it was huge. There were many cultivators who had been stuck at the martial god realm their entire lives. His divine energy was also surging out and he had more than 20 streaks. From this point of view, he was obviously much more powerful than Duan Wuhan. However, what was truly terrifying was his talent. The cry of a phoenix resounded through the sky. It was actually the phoenix bloodline. Furthermore, it was a pure phoenix bloodline. As soon as this phoenix appeared, its entire body was pitch black. After rushing out of snow-blowing city, it immediately sprinkled down endless brilliance. Although it was a completely black phoenix, it was still incomparably beautiful and sacred. Although Yonggang had not awakened his divine power, his innate talent was too powerful. He was an innate divine fetus. Just the flight of the black phoenix alone was enough to make people feel pressured. If he had awakened his divine power, he would probably be a genius without a divine fetus. He was just releasing his aura. Then he would be able to defeat his opponent. To be able to become the top student of Wuwei Academy, that kind of talent was enough to make people's scalps tingle. It was no wonder that he was jealous of Linling. That was because Linling was so talented and powerful, yet he hadn't become a cultivator. How could he be willing to accept that? Innate divine embryo. In Snow City, many people's faces changed greatly. In the beginning, they thought that the young man was too arrogant. But now it would seem that the young man really did have the ability to be arrogant. Don't worry, Linling also has an innate divine embryo. There's no need to fear him. However, someone immediately said, both of them have innate divine embryos. In this case, it will be difficult for Lord Linling to defeat that young man. And with that young man's arrogant look, he will definitely be more arrogant after this. Someone secretly said worriedly. Because many people knew that the arrival of these city lords was a show of strength to snow-blowing city. Therefore, if Linling couldn't defeat Yonggang, then this show of strength would never dissipate and the other city lords would never give face to snow-blowing city. Linling, student of Snow City, I heard that you have an innate divine embryo and are very powerful. But in my opinion, you're just oh. As his aura continued to rise, Yonggang also said indifferently. Looking at the sky again, the black phoenix was flying. It had a large number of phoenix bodies, turning the sky into a world of phoenixes. It was gorgeous and colorful. It is indeed the bloodline of the Phoenix clan. Treasure god Nanwu Fengyu said lightly. Like the Dragon clan, the Phoenix clan was an ancient clan that was rarely seen in the void. They couldn't understand how Yonggang had obtained such a terrifying talent. Are you still not going to make your move? After his aura reached its peak, Yonggang looked at Linling proudly. Let's go. However, Lin Ling only glanced at the sky, then turned and left with Yu Yu and the others. This made everyone suspicious. Even Yu Yu and the others were the same. Leave. Yonggang was stunned. Because, weren't they supposed to have a big battle? Why did Lin Ling leave? Are you afraid? Yonggang guessed that Lin Ling must be afraid of him. Trial taker Lin Ling didn't expect him to be so cowardly. He knew that he couldn't beat him and was embarrassed, so he didn't want to fight. The other city lords also had the same thought. They all smiled contemptuously, looking at Lin Ling's back and shaking their heads mockingly. It seemed that Lin Ling really relied on his identity as a trial taker to make a name for himself. Afraid. Just as they were laughing, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded out. You can't even tell when I'm about to make my move. How are you going to fight me? The voice came from Lin Ling, and it had a hint of helplessness. This caused the entire city to fall silent. Yonggong's eyes narrowed. Lin Ling had made his move? Boom. Almost as soon as Lin Ling finished speaking, 2 dragon gods suddenly appeared in the sky. They were majestic and filled with endless draconic might. These 2 dragon gods were so huge that one couldn't see the end of them. After they appeared, they coiled around the black phoenix from the left and right, one in front and one behind. This was also a battle between dragons and phoenixes. However, compared to the black phoenix, there were more dragon gods, and they were all innate godly fetuses. When did you have the innate bloodline of the dragon gods? Yonggong's eyes trembled violently. In his eyes, the black phoenix was entangled by the 2 dragon gods. It couldn't resist at all, and then it fell to the ground under countless shocked gazes. Yonggang also spat out a mouthful of scarlet blood, and his face turned pale. Just now, when the 2 dragon gods came at him, he immediately felt a terrifying aura that he couldn't resist at all. He was defeated in one move. And it was a clean defeat, and he was wholeheartedly convinced. The Black Phoenix Divine Embryo was naturally weaker than the 2 Dragon Divine Embryos. City Lord Yonggang. Seeing Yonggang sitting cross-legged, the other city lords were shocked. Their previous smugness disappeared in an instant, and they became docile and obedient. Thank you. Yonggang sat cross-legged for a moment to recover, and finally opened his eyes. Then, he looked solemnly in the direction Lin Ling had disappeared and said word by word. He knew that Lin Ling had held back, or he would have been seriously injured. Moreover, it was rumored that Lin Ling had 2 divine embryos in his body, one of fire and one of thunder. But in his battle with him, Lin Ling had not used these 2 divine embryos. He had relied on his dragon god talent to defeat him. Therefore, if Lin Ling had used his full strength, he would have been defeated even more thoroughly. If you can't even sense when I attacked, how can you talk about fighting me? Lin Ling's words lingered in his mind, and then his bitter smile deepened. Indeed, he couldn't sense Lin Ling's attack at all. Chapter 4164. Governor Yong, please. We don't have much time left. Let's get down to business. At this time, Song Chiri's voice drifted into his ears. Yes, the life of a deity is more important. Yonggang quickly stood up and smiled apologetically. Now, he was no longer as proud and arrogant as before, because Lin Ling also taught him a lesson. In a place like Snow-Blowing City, it was better for them, the city lords, to follow the rules. Sorry, I'm late. Governor Tsong, I came here in a hurry and didn't bring anything good. However, I brought a bottle of 10,000-year-old Void Jade Star wine. I hope you'll accept it. When the other governors saw that Yonggang had been defeated, they surrendered completely and smiled apologetically. One by one, they became well-behaved and obedient. That's good. Let's go back. Song Chiri laughed and asked people to prepare good wine and delicious food to welcome the governors. Of course, the moment he turned around, he was extremely excited. He had never expected that Lin Ling would defeat the governor so easily. It was faster, more convenient, and more domineering than he had imagined. After all, if Lin Ling defeated Yonggang after 300 rounds, although it would be satisfying, obviously, the governors would not accept it. Because Lin Ling was a trial taker, it was not surprising that he could win. However, Lin Ling's move was simple and neat. The effect was different. It was like a loud slap. At this time, Lin Ling led the crowd to the courtyard. As for what had happened before, Lin Ling naturally did not take it to heart. With his current strength, No one in the martial god realm could defeat him except for the top 10 martial gods of the 9 regions. Of course, the deities were an exception. After all, the deities were valued by the deities. Their means were mysterious and could not be underestimated. After returning to the courtyard, the crowd chatted animatedly. Lin Ling accompanied them for a long time, and then he was called out by the old woman. Under an ancient pine tree outside the courtyard, the needle-like pine leaves scattered in the wind. The old woman stood under the pine tree and looked at Lin Ling with gratification. "Senior, what is it?" Lin Ling respected the old woman from the bottom of his heart. Even if he felt that his current strength was probably not much weaker than the old woman was still a senior in his heart. "I just received an order from Lord Lei Gong. You have become a 7-star trial taker." The old woman took a deep breath, suppressed her excitement, and said word by word. 7 stars. Hearing this, Lin Ling's pupils trembled violently. One had to know that he was only a 5-star not long ago. Now that he had jumped by 2 stars, he had missed at least 5 or 6 missions. That's right, Lei Gong is currently discussing the spirit kingdom with the other 3 great gods. However, before he left the hall he told me, "Lin Ling, you're amazing. You're a trial taker among the 4 great gods and have the fastest growth rate." The old woman, who had just suppressed her excitement, could no longer hold it in. You have to know that for others to complete a trial mission, the fastest would take 100 years, and the slowest would take 1,000 years. However, you have completed several major missions in just 3 years. It can be described as a miracle. Alright, what did you encounter when you were searching for the spirit kingdom? Why did Lei Gong reward you like this? Now that you've completed a 2-star mission, you can request 4 rewards from Lei Gong. Congratulations! The old woman said incoherently. "Senior, you spoke too fast. I can't even react." Seeing the excited old woman, Lin Ling was speechless. His words made the old woman slap her forehead and laugh. All along, the old woman did not speak much to Lin Ling and gave off a serious vibe. However, as Lin Ling continued to grow stronger, this seriousness disappeared. Instead, she was as close to Lin Ling as a family member. Next, Lin Ling did not hide anything and told her about how he had chased away the great god of the spirit kingdom. "I see. Heavens, you actually chased away a god. TSK. TSK. Sometimes, even I am afraid of the things you do." Hearing Lin Ling's words, the old woman was undoubtedly shocked. With the strength of a martial god, he had disrupted the plan of a god. It was no wonder that Lei Gong had rewarded Lin Ling so much. She could not help but admire Lin Ling's luck. This was because a god could have killed Lin Ling with just one look. However, Lin Ling had taken the risk and stopped the great god of the spirit kingdom before he was about to awaken. All of this sounded simple, but the old woman knew that it was definitely more difficult than ascending to the heavens. "Alright, now that I've become a 7-star trial taker, I can get 4 rewards?" Lin Ling was obviously more concerned about the rewards because he also wanted Lei Gong to help him remove the hidden danger in his body. Moreover, his realm had advanced by leaps and bounds, and his 6 dantians had all become divine fetuses. He also wanted to open his 7th dantian. To open the dantian, one had to cultivate their essence, qi, and spirit at the same time. However, Lin Ling's current realm, soul force, and physical strength had already reached the standard. He only lacked the cultivation resources needed to open the dantian. Therefore, he also wanted to use the rewards to exchange for treasures. That's right, there are 4 rewards. Moreover, you are a 7-star trial taker. When ordinary trial takers meet you, they have to bow to you because your status is higher than theirs. The old woman smiled and was happy for Lin Ling. Moreover, Lin Ling's status had risen, and so had her status. Among the many guardians, the others did not dare to laugh at her easily. There's such a rule? Hearing this, Lin Ling was a little suspicious. He remembered that when he went to Lei Gong's hall, the trial takers had a higher status than him, but they rarely put on airs with their status. You don't know about this? Seeing that Lin Ling seemed to be hearing this for the first time, the old woman was shocked. Lin Ling scratched the back of his head. It was indeed his first time hearing this. However, his eyes suddenly lit up. He recalled the first time he went to Lei Gong's hall. Sister Zhan seemed to be making things difficult for him, and the other trial takers not only did not help him, but also spoke for Sister Zhan. This seemed to indicate the difference between the trial takers. Level. As for later, Lei Gong had already regarded himself as a successor. Although the others did not know, they could more or less guess it from Lei Gong's attitude. No wonder later in Lei Gong's hall, although Sister Zhan and the others were easy to talk to, they looked at Lin Ling with strange eyes. You just entered the world of gods, so you are not familiar with these rules. This is normal. The old woman nodded to Lin Ling. Senior, I heard that there is a world of gods in the final world, but why haven't I seen it yet? Lin Ling also remembered what people called this place when he first came to Miaozhou. This place had the final world and the world of gods. Now, he had a firm foothold in the final world, but he had never heard of the world of gods. You don't have to worry about this, because I estimate that it won't be long before Lord Lei Gong takes you to the world of gods. There are all the gods under the 4 great gods, powerful holy knights, great generals, and so on. The old woman smiled, her eyes filled with yearning. Even I have only been there once, and that was the homeland of the gods in the past. Chapter 4165. The place where the Battle of the Gods took place was also the era of the gods. The old woman nodded heavily at Lin Ling hearing this. Lin Ling was suddenly excited because he had heard many things about the era of the gods and had always been curious. He did not expect that it was the world of gods. At that time, during the dusk of the gods fell. That piece of land was probably deserted. For now, you should wait for the news because Lei Gong is discussing with the other gods. When he returns, he will definitely look for you. Seeing Lin Ling full of yearning, the old woman suddenly smiled and said, Moreover, you often do missions outside, so you should seize this time to rest and accompany your family. Okay. Lin Ling also had this idea. He also wanted to see what treasures would be in the inheritance treasure after reaching the 4th level of the martial god realm. By the way, Lei Gong also told you to be careful because you interrupted the plan of the Spirit Nation. I'm afraid that the Spirit Nation will target you. The Spirit Nation is in the dark and you are in the light. Sometimes it's impossible to guard against them. As for the 9 regions, there are very few people who can shake you. At this time, the old woman warned again. Lin Ling nodded and then walked back to the courtyard with the old woman. Lin Ling naturally knew that although he seemed powerful now, there were still many people who could take his life. And there were many such people. Luli Empress. 9 regions, 10 great martial gods. Especially the Duan lineage martial god. Because Duan Wuhan died in the hands of Lin Ling, this was equivalent to cutting off the bloodline of the Duan family. The Duan lineage martial god would definitely not let Lin Ling go. Returning to the courtyard, Lin Ling suppressed all the things in his heart and enjoyed the hard-won family reunion. That night, Snow-Blowing City was also incomparably lively. Some acquaintances of the final world also came to visit at this moment. This kind of life lasted for a full 10 days before Lin Ling began to return to his peaceful life. At present, he was waiting for Lei Gong to summon him. At that time, he could mention the reward to Lei Gong. In the room, Lin Ling sat cross-legged. His eyes were calm. His originally well-defined face was now less murderous and more sacred. Strands of divine power lingered around his body, flickering like fireflies. It was this divine power that distinguished Lin Ling from ordinary martial gods. In the 9 regions, there were not many martial gods who had divine power. And those who had this power without a doubt, a symbol of the top experts. Around Lin Ling, the phantoms of the 6 divine embryos flowed like water. The twin dragon gods, the wraith jellyfish, and primal chaos were like strange beasts of the world standing guard. And above Lin Ling's head, the human sovereign's flame and the Thunderlock physique were still fighting. The divine might they exuded was clearly superior to the other talents. Whoosh! After an unknown period of time, Lin Ling's eyes finally opened. His left eye was filled with golden flames and his right eye was filled with white lightning. My realm has finally stabilized. Lin Ling said softly. He had broken through 2 realms in a row on this trip to Spirit Light City. Therefore, he was afraid that his realm would be unstable. After all, the boundary essence of the martial god realm was no small matter. If he was careless and caused the boundary essence to become chaotic, it was possible for him to self-destruct. The power of that self-destruction was undoubtedly very strong. Especially since Lin Ling had 6 dantians. The power of his self-destruction was comparable to the peak of the martial god realm. Therefore, after reaching the 4th level of the martial god realm, Lin Ling did not dare to be in a hurry to break through. It seems that the energy given by the Spirit Nation is very pure. There are no side effects when breaking through realms. However, when I was stabilizing my realm, I did not feel anything strange. It was as if there were no changes in my body. Lin Ling mumbled to himself. He knew that the quieter it was, the more dangerous it would be. If the spirit nation falls, the energy will never explode. However, once the spirit nation's deities come near, the energy will disturb your dantian and turn you into a member of the spirit nation. The giant ghost said calmly as he sat by the window and stared at the pitch-black night sky. What a ticking time bomb. Yes. Lin Ling nodded, then let out a helpless sigh. As expected, most of the things that were obtained too cheaply were not good stuff. Forget it. I'll wait for Lord Lei Gong to return and see if he has any ideas. Lin Ling did not think too much about it. Instead, the divine inheritance treasure appeared in his mind and a smile of anticipation appeared on his face. Currently, Lin Ling had many treasures on him, especially the indigo spiritual flower. Of course, he had given the precious indigo spiritual flower to Yu Yu and Yuer, and the others to increase their talents. However, he had only given them one indigo spiritual flower. After all, Lin Ling had personally experienced the power of the indigo spiritual flower. If he did not have a powerful refining method, he would explode. Currently, Lin Ling did not dare to refine the indigo spiritual flower so easily. He would only make plans after he became stronger. Therefore, his attention was now focused on the god's heirloom. 4th level martial god. Who knew what kind of rare treasures there would be in this treasure trove? I estimate that the treasures of a 4th level martial god are similar to those of a 3rd level martial god. Seeing Lin Ling drawing the seal in the air, the giant ghost floated over and said curiously, "Why are you so sure?" Lin Ling asked the giant ghost as he drew the seal to open the divine inheritance treasure. Because the divine inheritance treasure will guarantee that you will surpass the martial god realm and achieve the martial god realm, but it won't provide you with too much help. After all, it's only beneficial to you. The ultimate tribulation of the martial god realm is the greatest tribulation of the martial god realm. It's a kind of reliance, a kind of inner demon. The giant ghost said. Lin Ling was well aware of this too. Let's see if you're right. Lin Ling waved his right hand, causing a loud explosion. Following this, the rift was torn open, revealing a black hole. Lin Ling and the giant ghost looked into the black hole, and the first thing they saw was a black token. The World Massacre Order. This treasure again? Lin Ling and the giant ghost exchanged glances with one another and smiled. Even though it was as the giant ghost had said, that a 4th level martial god realm cultivator would not unlock any unique treasures, the World Massacre Order was more than enough. At the very least, it gave Lin Ling another life-saving trump card. Although this trump card was a one-time use, there weren't many powerhouses in the final world who could block this trump card. G. O. D stones, TSK, 100 of them. Based on the cost of refining them last time, I should be able to improve my god force by 50 streams. Following this, Lin Ling was overjoyed when he saw the number of G.O.D. stones. Currently, if he were to stumble into someone with a strong godly embryo, he could defeat them with his god force, such as Xianxia. The last treasure was none other than the god's essence fragment. Chapter 4166. The looting of the treasures is over. Overall, it's the same as the 3rd layer martial god realm, but there are more of them. Following this, Lin Ling put the treasures away and said in a dissatisfied tone, "Be content with what you have, any one of your treasures is priceless to others, but you can get one every time you break through. If others knew about it, they would be jealous." The giant ghost said fiercely, "If I'm not mistaken, there are still a few of them. Therefore, I'm not the only one benefiting from it." Lin Ling shook his head with a smile. He clearly knew that the benefits in the eyes of others were just so-so to the gods. For example, the Ling Kingdom was a tycoon. They could easily give out godly embryos to others and grant them the right to become a god. That being said, those gods could not be compared to the real gods during the era of the gods. They could only be considered fake gods. However, even though your cultivation has stabilized, your godly force is rising too fast. It's not suitable for you to refine it anymore. Otherwise, the godly force will drown out the godly force you've comprehended. The giant ghost said. Lin Ling nodded. Why don't I exchange 100 godly stones for cultivation resources? You're going to use them to open your 7th dantian, right? The giant ghost guessed Lin Ling's intention. Even though it did not know what kind of cultivation technique Lin Ling had practiced that allowed him to open his dantian so frequently, it knew that Lin Ling had the ability to open his seventh dantian after spending some time with him. If you need a huge amount of cultivation resources, you'll need a lot of monarch crystals. During the era of the gods cultivated with a godly spring. This kind of spring water only appears in the void. It's the essence of spiritual qi. It's extremely rare, so it should be enough to satisfy your needs. Godly spring. Lin Ling remembered the name. Following this, he began to cultivate again. This time, he was not going to improve the human emperor's flame, but the Bodhi testimony godly art. The Bodhi testimony godly art could improve his soul force, which was what he valued the most. The words of the Bodhi testimony godly art appeared in his mind. Lin Ling entered a meditative state. The enlightened heart Bodhi was known as the Bodhisattva who had ascended to the ground to comprehend the truth of the Dharma. After all, it was pure, which was the so-called Prajna Paramitha form. The ancient Sanskrit words floated in Lin Ling's mind, as if an ancient elder was whispering in his ear. Inside Lin Ling's dantian, a wave of auspicious and peaceful energy appeared from the 6 great dantians, causing the tyrannical boundary essence to calm down. This made Lin Ling realize that the Bodhi testimony divine skill seemed to be able to suppress the evil power of the spirit kingdom. Wang. Suddenly, an ancient and huge statue appeared in Lin Ling's mind. The statue was benevolent and looked at Lin Ling with affection. This time, the ancient Sanskrit was being whispered by the statue. Patriarch Subhuti. Lin Ling's mind shook. Wasn't this the ancient god he met in the myriad worlds? Under the Sanskrit words of the statue, Lin Ling felt a warm energy flowing through his body. The sound of the great Tao seemed to be lingering around Lin Ling's body, constantly nourishing him. At the same time, a soul seed seemed to have been opened in his soul force. Then, the warm voice of the great Tao started to tumble, and it actually turned into a blue cloud. All of this appeared deeply in Lin Ling's soul. Lin Ling could clearly sense that in the blue cloud, a blue divine dragon was swallowing the clouds and riding the mist. It was so majestic. The Sin Sea Dragon King of the Blue Bodhi, the divine dragon appeared to slay demons. This was the 3rd level of the Bodhi testimony divine skill. The 3rd level had increased the power of God by 10 strands. However, it had to be used after the 1st and 2nd levels. The 1st level was the red Bodhi, the 2nd level was the yellow Bodhi, and the 3rd level was the blue Bodhi. A total of 12 strands of the power of God were born. One had to know that these 12 strands of the power of God were much more powerful than the power of God that the Godstone had comprehended. Now, Lin Ling had a total of 62 strands of the power of God. Bas! The sound of a Buddhist bell rang in Lin Ling's mind, causing him to slowly open his eyes. His body quietly emitted a righteous and peaceful power of Buddha. Success! The giant ghost's voice sounded at the same time. Lin Ling nodded immediately. He felt even more fortunate because he knew that the reason he was able to comprehend the 3rd level so smoothly was because of Patriarch Bodhi's Sanskrit. My soul force has increased by 3,000 strands, reaching 38,000 strands. Lin Ling licked his lips and became inexplicably excited. He then asked, "How long did it take me to comprehend this?" 3 months. The giant ghost said. Fortunately, it didn't take too long. Lin Ling had spent a lot of time in seclusion. This time, it only took him 3 months. This undoubtedly made him very satisfied. Then, Lin Ling tidied up and left the room. Outside the room, everyone was still busy. Just like before, there was a happy atmosphere. Nanwu Fengyu was playing with Xiao Yu. When he saw Lin Ling, he could not help but smile. "You're out." Lin Ling smiled and nodded. "Brother Lin Ling." Xiao Yu immediately rushed to Lin Ling, and Lin Ling picked her up. Only then did he realize that the little girl had grown up a lot. "Right, treasure god. Do you know where the holy spring is?" Lin Ling teased Xiao Yu, then looked at Nanwu Fengyu and asked. "The holy spring is a very ancient item." Nanwu Fengyu replied with a sigh. "This treasure is used by the gods for cultivation." "Why? Do you want it too?" "Yes, because the royal crystal is no longer of much help to me. Even if it can help with cultivation, it requires a lot of royal crystals. I'm afraid that only the Kaiyuan River can gather this amount, but it will take a lot of time." Lin Ling nodded. "I'm not too familiar with the current void. By the way, the last time I passed by a place, I heard that there was a holy spring there." Nanwu Fengyu shook his head, then his eyes lit up and he smiled. That's the true inheritance of Miao Shen. Miao Shen's true inheritance. Lin Ling exclaimed. He had forgotten about this place. This was the gathering place of the strongest boundary gods in the final world. It was not surprising that there was a holy spring here. Thank you, Senior. Haha, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten about it. Lin Ling hurriedly bowed and said. You, in fact, are more familiar with Miao Shen's true inheritance than I am. It's just that you have a lot of things to do and can't remember at the moment. However, I heard that Miao Shen's true inheritance has a grudge with you. If you trade with them for the Holy Spring, I'm afraid they won't agree. Nanwu Fengyu reminded. Hearing this, Lin Ling slapped his forehead. Miao Shen's true inheritance was a group of arrogant boundary masters, and they had a grudge with Lin Ling. It was indeed difficult to trade with them. However, Lin Ling was determined to open the 7th Dantian, so he had to prepare in advance. Chapter 4167. I have indeed offended many people in God Miao's true inheritance. Princess Tian and the woman who sat in the palanquin during Daoist Duobao's auction. In this World Spiritist Alliance, I only know Yi Yeshua. Oh, that's right, I can ask her where God Miao's true inheritance is. Lin Ling pondered for a bit and decided to leave immediately. Yu Yu and the others were not far away. When they heard Lin Ling's words, they immediately wanted to follow him. Lin Ling felt that it should not be too dangerous and immediately nodded in agreement. God Miao's true inheritance was, after all, a huge alliance. They knew that Lin Ling was Lei Gong's man and would definitely not dare to act recklessly. Moreover, Lin Ling planned to use divine stones to buy the divine spring. It was likely that God Miao's true inheritance would not refuse divine stones. Lin Ling brought along Yu Yu, Xianxia, and An Yuer warned his family, and then left in large strides. He reckoned that he would not be leaving for long. Thus, he did not inform anyone. God Miao's true inheritance? I've heard of this mysterious World Spiritist Alliance. However, this alliance is very mysterious and I have never had the chance to see it. Today, I can finally see it. Yu Yu was clearly very curious about God Miao's true inheritance. However, God Miao's true inheritance has enmity with Lin Ling. Those arrogant world spiritists are not easy to talk to. Xianxia stuck out her nose and said, although God Miao's true inheritance is arrogant, they still have principles. If Lin Ling is going to make a trade, I believe they will not refuse. An Yuer was once the holy maiden of the immortal temple. Thus, she was naturally more familiar with God Miao's true inheritance. Yu Yu, here you go. Lin Ling took out an umbrella and gave it to Yu Yu. Then he explained, this is the great overarching sky umbrella. It can block the attacks of late-stage martial gods with divine embryo. Your talent is to support everyone. Thus, it's better to increase your defense. What about you? Yu Yu immediately looked at Lin Ling. Don't worry, your husband is no longer the same as before. The overarching heavenly umbrella is no longer of much help to me. Lin Ling said with a smile. They had just walked out of the snow-blowing city when several silhouettes quickly arrived from afar. After seeing Lin Ling, they immediately saluted. Great leader! The person in the lead was called Canon God. He was one of the leaders of the God-Slayer Alliance. Lin Ling had subdued him at the Kai Yuan River. Lin Ling. Beside Canon God was a beautiful woman. She was Yi Shui, one of the 4 leaders of the God-Slayer Alliance. She was also the successor of Miao Shen's true teachings. Yi Shui. Do you know where Miao Shen's true inheritance is? Lin Ling exchanged some pleasantries before revealing his purpose. Hearing this, Yi Yeshua was stunned. The whereabouts of Miao God's true legacy was usually a secret and could not be easily revealed, even if she was the successor of Miao God's true legacy. However, on second thought, Lin Ling was a trial tester. His identity was obviously not an ordinary person, so he was qualified to know. Immediately, Yi Yeshua took out a compass and handed it to Lin Ling. The location of Miao God's true legacy is in the void, and the entrance is in Jianghu. Only this kind of compass can know where the entrance is. After all, there are many martial artists who want to help Miao God's true legacy refine weapons. In order to prevent too many people from rushing into Miao God's true legacy, this rule was set. Yi Yeshua said. Hearing this, Lin Ling curled his lips. This Miao God's true legacy was really arrogant. Okay, thank you. Then, Lin Ling thanked her and gave a sapphire nimble crystal to Yeshue. Lin Ling, this is not good. Seeing this, Yeshue was a little flattered. She knew that in today's God Slayer alliance, Lin Ling was the biggest leader. Young Master Yao, Majin Tianzi, and herself, the former three leaders, had quietly taken a step back and given their positions to Lin Ling. Although Lin Ling was the last to join the God Slayer alliance among the four of them, his abilities were obvious to all. Previously, he had destroyed the Qilin martial god and Wentian martial god. Now, he had established the God Slayer alliance. All of these were thanks to him. It could be said that the God Slayer alliance used to be a little famous in Jianghu and other small divine prefectures. However, Lin Ling had promoted the God Slayer alliance and made it famous in Zhou. Take it. Don't treat me as a leader. We are friends. Lin Ling insisted that Yeshue accept it. Yeshue had no choice but to nod her head. Goodbye. Then, Lin Ling left Snow City with Yuer and the others. As soon as they left Snow City, Lin Ling took out the compass and checked it. The direction seemed to be outside the final world. What a troublesome true inheritance of Miao Shen. Seeing this, Lin Ling shook his head helplessly. Miao Shen's true inheritance was no different from a god to the experts in Zhou. However, for experts like Lin Ling, it was not very useful. Because Lin Ling was after the innate divine weapon. Apparently, there were only a few people in Miao Shen's true inheritance who could make an innate divine weapon. Even if they could, they would need countless treasures. Therefore, it was more convenient for Lin Ling to explore the forbidden area. If Lin Ling was not in a hurry to get the divine spring, he would not have come into contact with Miao Shen's true inheritance. After leaving the final world, Lin Ling headed toward Zhou. Finally, he found that the entrance was in Tianzhou, one of Zhou's 9 prefectures. Lin Ling had not been to Tianzhou much. He only knew that it was the third from the bottom in Zhou. After confirming the target, Lin Ling looked back and saw Yu and the others chatting. It seemed that they were very happy to be able to accompany Lin Ling. Even the iceberg beauty in Yuer showed a rare happy smile. This made Lin Ling not in a hurry. He was out fighting all year round and rarely accompanied his wife. Today, he would walk slowly with them. However, even if Lin Ling and the others walked slowly, they were all very powerful. Therefore, in less than a day, Tianzhou appeared in front of them. Tianzhou, have we arrived? The few of them floated in the void and looked at the ancient continent in the distance. Then, Yu smiled and asked. When they first came to the martial god realm, the Tianzhou was undoubtedly a colossus. But now, to them, the Tianzhou was as insignificant as a countryside. However, Lin Ling's soul force was very powerful. He immediately sensed many powerful auras in Tianzhou. He immediately said, "Don't underestimate this place. Tianzhou is full of powerful experts now." And Yuer also sensed it. It seems that those people are also here for Miao Shen's true inheritance. This time, the entrance to Miao Shen's true inheritance was in Tianzhou. Some people who heard the news would naturally come. Moreover, those who were qualified to enter Miao Shen's true inheritance would definitely have powerful backgrounds. The warriors in Tianzhou don't seem to have noticed that a large number of experts have gathered where they are. They are so stupid. Shen Yuangu suddenly laughed. Lin Ling immediately scratched her little nose and said, "It's not that they are stupid. It's just that the difference in strength is too great. In fact, when we were in Qingzhou, there might have been many experts. It's just that we couldn't detect them with our strength. So, we all thought that the strongest in Qingzhou was Emperor Qing." Chapter 4168. Let's go. Next, Lin Ling landed in Tianzhou with the girls. Tianzhou was very large, 3 times the size of Qingzhou. The cities were bustling and lively, similar to Qingzhou. After Lin Ling landed, he immediately sensed many familiar feelings. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. This was because the familiar feeling came from the flame of the human king. This meant that there were people who had been assimilated by the human king's flame. Of course, those people also sensed Lin Ling's arrival. Their expressions changed and they immediately rushed towards Lin Ling from all corners of Tianzhou. Lin Ling did not care about this. He guessed that those people were here for God Miao's true inheritance. It was a good opportunity to ask them about God Miao's true inheritance. Then, Lin Ling appeared in an extremely bustling city according to the compass. This was called Sky City, which was also the city where the divine emperor of Tianzhou lived. This divine emperor could also control ancient powers and was extremely powerful. Of course, to the current Lin Ling and the others, that ancient power was not worth mentioning. Walking on the street, Yu Yu and the others' beautiful faces undoubtedly became the focus of attention. Many people looked at Lin Ling with envy but did not dare to approach him. Of course, there were always exceptions. What beautiful ladies! Why don't you accompany me tonight? Young man. A young man in extraordinary attire led a few experts to block Lin Ling and the others' path. The young man said with a smile on his face. He's so silly. Seeing this, Shen Yuanguer could not help but laugh. She naturally knew why the other party was here. However, in her eyes, this young man was too weak. Yes. I'm very silly. How about it? Are you interested in going shopping with me? The young man was mocked but was not angry. Instead, he continued to smile. It was obvious that he was a veteran at picking up girls. Come on, sir. I know you want to pursue them, but they are not people you can afford to offend. Lin Ling also shook his head. He was not angry at all. Instead, he advised him. Brat, are you their guardian angel? What? When I, Li Xiao, do something, I still need your permission. The young man looked at Lin Ling and his eyes turned cold. You don't have to ask for my permission. In fact, I'm not stopping you. I'm just advising you out of kindness. However, who would have thought that Lin Ling still wasn't angry? After leaving behind a sentence, he strode forward. That look seemed to say, if you want to hit on them, go ahead. Such an action undoubtedly left the young man dumbfounded. The passers-by were also confused. Generally speaking, when encountering such a situation, shouldn't the blue-robed young man be the hero who saves the beauty? Who knew that he would run away instead? This was too unmanly. How would they know that the reason why Lin Ling couldn't be bothered with them was that Yu Yu and the rest were much stronger than these people? Even if Yu Yu and the others didn't have Lin Ling as their husband, Yu Yu and the others wouldn't have taken a fancy to that young man, because his status and strength were not on the same level. Haha, did you see that? Aren't I very impressive? However, the young man obviously didn't know that. At this moment, he was very proud of himself. Impressive. You are indeed very impressive. Yu Yu and the others couldn't help but roll their eyes. Seeing that Lin Ling had walked far away, they hurriedly wanted to chase after him. However, the young man stopped Yu Yu and the others and said confidently, Beautiful ladies, tonight is the full moon. I wonder if I have the fortune to invite you to admire the full moon? This scene made many people on the street envious. They thought that Li Xiao was really lucky in love. You're such an idiot. Reward your sister, don't block the way. However, Yu Yu and the others were extremely impatient. They didn't hold back and directly attacked. Bang bang bang. They didn't even need to use any moves. Just their aura alone was enough to defeat the young man and the others and trample them on the street. Reward your sister, I already said. Don't block the way. The Shen Yuanguer was the most violent. She directly beat the young man until his head was swollen like a pig's head. The people on the street were shocked. They never thought that these three delicate ladies would have such terrifying strength. Moreover, their attacks were so ferocious. Li Xiao was considered a celebrity in Heaven City. He was also extremely powerful. However, he was beaten like a dog? This was the first time they had seen the powerful Li Xiao end up in such a state. Li Xiao was clearly dumbfounded. He ignored the intense pain in his body and stared at the three beauties in disbelief. Unfortunately, Yu Yu and the Shen Yuangu didn't even look at him and left in disdain. And Yuer looked at Li Xiao calmly and asked, Does it hurt? It hurts a lot. Thank you for your concern, beautiful lady. Li Xiao replied instinctively. Bang! Just as he raised his head, an Yuer stomped on Li Xiao's cheek. His cheek was deeply indented and his nose was probably broken into pieces. So violent. The people were shocked again. They thought that the last beauty was kinder, so they asked out of concern. Who knew that the last beauty was even more ferocious? Li Xiao knelt on the ground, his face facing in Yuer's foot. In the end he fell to the ground. Sigh, it's bad enough that he's weak, but he's also so ugly. It's bad enough that he's ugly, but he's also so stupid. He's a disgrace to the martial arts world. And Yuer sighed softly and chased after Lin Ling. This. These are 3 female tyrannosauruses. No wonder that handsome blue-robed young man didn't even care about them. Who could handle such violent beauties? The people on the street shuddered. The more timid ones even had their pants wet. Not long after Li Xiao fainted, a few figures walked down the street, talking and laughing. They looked to be middle-aged men, but their temperament was extraordinary. Suddenly, one of the middle-aged men cried out and rushed toward Li Xiao in disbelief. It was obvious that the young man who fell was his son. He never thought that in a place like Jianghu, his son would be knocked out and thrown on the street. What happened? A seemingly gentle middle-aged man next to him frowned. Anyone who knew him would know that he was the emperor god of Jianghu. Someone immediately told him what happened, causing the emperor god's face to darken. Under his watch, someone dared to be so arrogant? One should know that he and Li Xiao's father were close friends. Now that his son's head had been smashed and thrown on the street, how could he not do anything? No matter, I'll have them come personally to apologize. The emperor god said coldly. A terrifying pressure quietly spread out, causing the street to become a little colder. Brother Chen, sorry to trouble you. Li Xiao's father naturally knew who the middle-aged man was. He immediately said gratefully, "This is my territory. Whatever happens to your son, I'm responsible." The emperor god nodded. He was still standing in the same spot, but in the sky, an invisible force appeared and covered the street. Chapter 4169. Let him see what the ancient power is. Boom. In the end, the celestial the arch controlled the ancient power and suppressed it. Through the introduction of the passers-by, he roughly knew the appearance of those people, so he quickly locked onto them. In the sky, the ancient palace began to suppress, as if it was the will of the gods. This was the power that every celestial the arch in the 9 states could control, and it was used to suppress the divine land. Now, facing a few passers-by, the ancient power had erupted. It was obviously overkill. But the celestial the arch thought that it was all worth it. He wanted to give those people an unforgettable memory. And that memory was terrifying. What he hoped the most was that those people wouldn't be scared to death. While he was thinking, the huge palace had already approached the street. It was dark, covering the sky and blocking the sun. Everyone on the street was shocked, and they directly knelt down and kowtowed. This is the ancient power. The celestial the arch is angry. Elder. An old man who was more knowledgeable said with a pale face. Then, like the passers-by, he looked around, wanting to see why the celestial the arch was making such a big fuss. Then, they saw 3 women and a man walking along the street. The most speechless thing was that they did not seem to notice the ancient power in the sky. Instead, they walked while eating watermelons, as if they were shopping. What the hell? How could they be in the mood to eat watermelons? Brother Lin Ling, the watermelons here are not as sweet as the ones in the rainforest. Elder. One of them, a very beautiful woman, said with dissatisfaction. This made the martial artists on the street almost faint. It's not delicious. Elder. The man nodded and spat out the watermelon seed in his mouth. Rumble. In the sky, the ancient power roared and then stopped moving. Then, under the shocked eyes of the whole city, it exploded. The ancient power controlled by the celestial the arch also exploded? And it was spat out by the watermelon seed? Plop. The people on the street were still kneeling on the ground, but this time, they had completely fainted. They fell down one by one like crops, and they had fainted. Puh. As for the majestic celestial the arch in the sky, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and then his face turned pale and his body trembled. Even the ancient power was destroyed? This was like a dream to him. Moreover, he could clearly see that the other party had only spat out a few watermelon seeds. What if the other party had used his full strength? It was hard to imagine. Wang. His vision blurred, and he almost fell from the sky. Of course, he knew that today, a giant force came and opened the entrance. Therefore, many powerhouses from all 9 continents came to Jianghu. And this kind of thing ordinary people were not qualified to know. Even he, the celestial emperor, knew a little about it through the grapevine. Of course, he also doubted the authenticity of this news. But now he didn't doubt it, not in the slightest. This was because the 3 women and 1 man who had randomly appeared were already as powerful as gods. This also meant that in the Jianghu, There were many powerhouses of this level hiding. However, his status was too low and those powerhouses had no time to pay attention to him. Senior, spare my life, spare my life. Next, the Celestial the Arch knelt down in the sky and kowtowed continuously. Senior, please be magnanimous and forgive my previous offense. I was wrong, I know I was wrong. He was scared half to death. His soul was leaving his body and half of his soul was gone. However, the 3 women and 1 man on the street ignored him. Instead, they bought more fruits and ate them as they walked. Slowly, they disappeared at the end of the street. Naturally, the Celestial Emperor didn't dare to investigate anymore. He could only watch as those people disappeared. In the end, he sighed in relief. He knew that those people thought of him as a frog at the bottom of a well. They were too lazy to care about his previous mistakes. I didn't deserve to die. I didn't deserve to die. Thinking that he was lucky, the Celestial Emperor descended from the sky and walked down the street. However, his heart was still pounding. Brother Chen, where is that reckless piece of trash? Just then, the middle-aged man brought Li Xiao over. Though Li Xiao had woken up, his appearance was too horrible to look at. It was as if he was a completely different person. His nose was gone. His mouth and eyes were all sunken in towards his nose. There was also a footprint carved there that couldn't be washed away. With this appearance, he would never be able to see anyone again. Reckless piece of trash. Seeing Li Xiao and his son, the Celestial Emperor's anger exploded. Earlier, he offended that powerhouse, but that powerhouse didn't even care about him. This meant that the powerhouse didn't care about Li Xiao either. However, Li Xiao was still beaten up so badly. This meant that Li Xiao must have done something that angered the heavens. He deserved it. It's bad enough that he was beaten up, but he almost dragged the Celestial Emperor down with him? How dare you? Bang! The Celestial Emperor kicked out and sent Li Xiao flying like a gourd. You piece of trash! He chased after him and started punching and kicking. Do you know that you almost killed me? It's bad enough that you're an idiot, but why did you drag me down with you? Motherfucker, it's bad enough that you're ugly, but you're also so stupid. You are a disgrace to Jianghu. The Celestial Emperor today no longer had the dignity of a Celestial Emperor. He was more like a hooligan. This made Li Xiao's father speechless. His mind was full of questions. Because this was the first time he's seen the Celestial Emperor lose his composure like this. It was as if someone stole his wife. However, he was experienced and immediately guessed what was going on. Father, save me. Li Xiao couldn't have been more wronged. He was just beaten up, and now he was being beaten up again. What did he, Li Xiao, do to make the heavens jealous of him? Save your sister. After his father guessed what was going on, not only did he not save him, he also joined in the beating. Li Xiao was dumbfounded. Of course, as he was being beaten up, Li Xiao finally didn't act like an idiot. He remembered the 3 women and 1 man from not too long ago. Could it be them? At this moment, Lin Ling led an Yuer and the rest through several streets. Then, a luxurious chamber of commerce appeared in front of them. The chamber of commerce was dazzling with people entering and leaving one after another. From the looks of it, these people were either rich or respectable. Even the guards behind them were not weak. Of course, this strength was only to Jianghu. To Lin Ling and them, who came from the final world, it was not worth mentioning. Lin Ling didn't come here out of boredom. Because he realized that the direction the compass was pointing to was this trading company. The trading company's name was also the Wan Shun Trading Company. On the surface, it appeared to be a rich trading company that had nothing to do with Miao Xin's true teachings. But only those who knew about it knew that this place was not to be underestimated. Is it necessary to hide so much? How arrogant! Chapter 4170. I also want to ignore it, but I guess that if we want to enter Miao Xin's true inheritance, we will have to face some difficulties later. Lin Ling spread his hands and said. He had been to countless cities and forbidden areas since he started learning martial arts. Naturally, his life experience was not shallow. Oh! Yu and the others' eyes immediately flashed. As they walked into the Chamber of Commerce, the people who passed by them looked at Lin Ling and the others in shock. Their eyes were filled with admiration. What a handsome man! And those 3 women, they're all so beautiful. Many people were shocked, and even some big shots looked at Lin Ling and the others a few more times. However, Lin Ling and the others looked calm, neither arrogant nor humble, so they did not dare to approach and ask. Walking along the luxurious corridor, Lin Ling and the others came to the end of the corridor. There was a hole there, and the red sandalwood door of the hall was tightly closed. There were several people guarding outside. From time to time, a mysterious person would come to the red sandalwood door and show an exquisite jade plate. The people guarding the door would immediately open the door without any expression and let them in. The people guarding the door were not strong, but their every movement carried a touch of arrogance. Boundary Master? It seems that we have arrived. Lin Ling suddenly smiled. He could see that those people had soul power, so they were undoubtedly boundary masters. However, to Lin Ling, a world spiritist of that level was simply too weak. When Lin Ling and Anuer moved forward, those people naturally stopped Lin Ling and the others. Moreover, they did not speak. They only looked up and down at Lin Ling and the others. Of course, more of them were staring at Anuer and the others. Obviously, they were also stunned by the beauty of Yu and the others. They did not expect that the blue-robed young man would bring so many beauties with him, which made them very envious. Your Excellency, you are quite bold to bring so many beauties with you. Without a certain level of strength, you can't keep them. One of them said with a smile. What he meant was that Lin Ling would definitely attract bees and butterflies when he went out with these beauties. If Lin Ling's strength was not good, then there would be endless trouble. Of course, Lin Ling was too young, so they thought that Lin Ling dared to be so ostentatious because he was ignorant. As boundary masters, they had seen countless experts over the years. Generally speaking, there were very few people as young as Lin Ling were strong, but they definitely had a background. You don't need to worry. Is the true inheritance behind the door? Lin Ling smiled faintly and pointed behind them. Since you were able to make it this far, I believe you should have some guesses as well. Why is there a need to ask so many questions? Someone said with a smile, his voice carrying arrogance. Well, we are to go in. Lin Ling ignored their arrogance and said faintly, You to go in? They were all to themselves to Lin to him to laugh. In short, if I wanted to go in, would the Miao clan's true inheritance let me in? Are you kidding me? If that was the case, everyone could easily enter Miao Shen's true inheritance. Miao Shen's true inheritance would have long been in chaos. Do you have an invitation? One of them asked. Then, when he saw Lin Ling's expression, he immediately knew that it was the first time that Lin Ling had heard of the invitation. He was even more certain that this blue-robed youth was a nouveau riche who did not understand the rules of the 9 prefectures. Do you think you can go in without an invitation? Or do you think that your father is the heavenly emperor? Let me tell you, even if your father is the heavenly emperor, you are not qualified to go in without an invitation. Boy, do you know what the final world is? Let me tell you, even if you are the city lord of the final world, you are not qualified to enter. Go. Do you know how the invitation is obtained? Our true inheritance sends out 356 invitation letters every year to various auctions. You can only obtain them through auctions. Do you understand? Country bumpkin. At the end, their voices became louder, and their saliva almost sprayed onto Lin Ling's face. It was as if they were wasting their saliva by saying so much to these country bumpkins. However, what they said was not wrong. The invitation letters of God Miao's true inheritance were very precious. There was no market for them. Whoever had more treasures could get an invitation letter. Those who had an invitation letter were also a symbol of status. In some big occasions, using an invitation letter could also make people look at them with new eyes and respect. Because those who could get an invitation letter had a huge background and strength that defied the heavens. See, I told you that this would happen. Seeing the arrogance of these boundary masters, Lin Ling did not seem to care. Instead, he smiled at Yu and the others. Brother Ling is still the best. Yu and the others immediately nodded. Of course, I have encountered this kind of thing many times. Lin Ling shrugged and then touched his nose. He did not have an invitation letter. If he wanted to go in, he would have to report his identity. He believed that with his identity as a trial taker, it should not be difficult to enter. Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it's you. At that moment, a sneer suddenly sounded. A large number of people walked out from the corridor behind them. The person in the lead was wearing a luxurious brocade robe and a jade crown on his head. His every movement carried the majesty of an emperor. If Lin Ling was said to be a free and unfettered person in the world, then this person was the monarch who ruled the world. Moreover, this aura was not only possessed by the person in the lead, but also by the people behind him. Of course, the aura of the person in the lead was the strongest. He was also Lin Ling's acquaintance. The seventh prince. The people behind him were naturally people from the Seventh Imperial Alliance. Even Grandfather Tang was beside the seventh prince. The seventh prince could be considered Lin Ling's old acquaintance. In the Kaiyuan River, Lin Ling's God Slayer Alliance had risen, and so had the Seventh Imperial Alliance. During the competition for a new heir, the seventh prince had been defeated by Lin Ling. After that, the seventh prince had also come to the exchange of pointers between the various academies. He had wanted to suppress Lin Ling's spirit, but in the end, he had been defeated by Lin Ling and had even lost his balls. As for Grandfather Tang, he had wanted to stand up for the seventh prince, but he had been taught a lesson by treasure god Nan Wu Fengyu. Therefore, when they saw Lin Ling, the seventh prince and Grandfather Tang's expressions turned ugly. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it's you, the eunuch. Why have you come to Miao Shen's true inheritance? By the way, could it be that you want to buy a pair of balls?" Lin Ling looked at the seventh prince with contempt and said in surprise. This sentence was like pouring salt on the wound. The seventh prince was stunned and trembled with anger. That day, his balls had been kicked by Lin Ling, and his dragon root had been destroyed. His innate talent had been damaged. This was the greatest humiliation of his life. That day, the damage to his innate talent was nothing. The main thing was his reputation. Now, the people who saw him looked at him strangely. Although they didn't dare to mention this matter personally, the seventh prince could sense their thoughts. Chapter 4171. Lin Ling, don't talk nonsense. While the seventh prince was trembling with anger, Grand Duke Tang gritted his teeth and shouted angrily. Lin Ling looked at Grand Duke Tang indifferently. Although the other party was very strong, he now had a life-saving trump card and was not afraid of him. Moreover, he believed that Grand Duke Tang would not dare to make a move on him in such a place. "You don't seem to have any balls. Are you here to buy God Miao's true inheritance?" Lin Ling said suspiciously. "Brother Ling, you're so bad." At the side, Yu and the others covered their mouths and laughed. Grand Duke Tang's fair face instantly turned red, all the way to his ears. His expression of gnashing his teeth but not daring to act recklessly was extremely comical. "Sir, what do you mean by that? Are you saying that our God Miao's true inheritance specializes in making balls?" The seventh prince and the others knew Lin Ling's identity, so they did not dare to act rashly. However, the barrier masters did not know. When they heard Lin Ling mocking God Miao's true inheritance, they were naturally not convinced. "Masters, does he not have an invitation?" At this time, the seventh prince finally reacted and suddenly sneered. "That's right. He doesn't have an invitation. He can't enter God Miao's true inheritance." The barrier masters immediately nodded and looked at Lin Ling with mocking eyes. Ha ha ha. Hearing this, the seventh prince suddenly burst into laughter. His laughter was extremely carefree. It was as if he had finally seen Lin Ling lose face. The rules of God Miao's true inheritance state that one cannot enter without an invitation. "Lin Ling, you want to enter without an invitation? Are you stupid?" The seventh prince waved his right hand and an exquisite jade token appeared in his hand. "Do you see this? This is an invitation. An invitation that was bought with real money. Lin Ling, oh Lin Ling, can you afford such a treasure? Country bumpkin." His last sentence was full of disdain. Country bumpkins really can't afford an invitation. The other barrier masters also nodded mockingly. Earlier, Lin Ling compared Miao Shen's true legacy to Eggy. Now, this Lin Ling didn't even have the qualifications to enter. So what was he pretending to be? "Do you see it? This is an invitation. Do you have it? Do you have it?" Pauper. The other princes also seemed to have found a place to vent. Each of them took out an exquisite jade tablet and waved it, wanting to blind Lin Ling's eyes. With them blocking the entrance, the people entering from the back were also blocked. When everyone saw this scene, they gasped. So many invitations from the same group of people. This group of people must have a big background. One had to know that they had spent countless efforts to obtain an invitation letter. They had relied on their connections and traveled far and wide to obtain it. Moreover, he had to pay a lot of royal crystals. With so many invitations, the amount of emperor crystals he had to pay was probably incalculable. Now, when they saw this group of people oppressing the blue-robed young man with invitations, they immediately sympathized with the blue-robed young man. Being mocked like this, the blue-robed young man must be very embarrassed and his self-esteem must have been hurt. Unfortunately, what could the blue-robed young man do? He could only endure the humiliation. Lin Ling, say something. Why aren't you saying anything? Seeing that Lin Ling was silent, the seventh prince suddenly laughed even louder. Lin Ling was still laughing, but his smile gradually turned into a sneer. And Yue and the others were also the same. They had never expected the seventh prince and the others to be so arrogant. Their saliva was almost spitting on their faces. Who says he doesn't have an invitation letter? However, at this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded. Then, the crowd was separated, and an old man strode over with an invitation letter in his hand. Then, he came in front of Lin Ling and presented it to Lin Ling with both hands. This sudden change caused the smiles of the seventh prince and the others to freeze in an instant. Someone gave up a precious invitation letter and gave it to Lin Ling? Is this person stupid? Do you know what you're doing? Giving away a precious invitation letter to someone else is also looking down on our invitation letter. The boundary master outside the door immediately said coldly, "It's none of your business." Who knew that the old man was also incomparably domineering as he fiercely glared back. I bought this invitation letter. I can give it to whoever I want. Even if I use it to wipe my ass, it's none of your business. Those boundary masters were highly respected. When had they ever been looked down upon like this? I'm the city lord of the final world's 36 main cities. City Lord Ouyang. If you're not convinced, come and find me. The old man smiled domineeringly, appearing fearless. Then he looked at Lin Ling. The domineering aura from before instantly disappeared, and in its place was a respectful expression. My lord, please accept the invitation letter. Lin Ling looked at the old man and smiled. Naturally, he knew who the old man was. It was an expert who had been assimilated by the human king's flame. Haha, how sad. You've bought so many invitation letters, yet you still have to push and push each other. Lin Ling, you're too down and out. When the seventh prince saw that Lin Ling had received an invitation letter, he immediately changed his angle to ridicule Lin Ling. Then, he gave a look to the other princes behind him. Those princes all understood and raised the invitation letters in their hands, telling Lin Ling that their seventh emperor alliance had plenty of invitation letters. However, this time they had clearly failed. Is that so? Just as they raised their invitation letters, and even as they were happily waving them around, a large amount of laughter resounded in the corridor. Soon after, a large number of powerhouses, who were dressed in luxurious robes and had powerful strength, walked over in an orderly manner. They all had invitation letters in their hands. The most shocking thing was that they were also waving their invitation letters. Their uniform movements actually blinded everyone's eyes. Most importantly, this group of people had more princes than the Seventh Emperor Alliance. What a grand display! The surrounding people were shocked. However, what shocked them even more was that after the group of people arrived arrogantly, they all bowed to Lin Ling. My lord, please accept our invitation letters. This group of people were obviously experts who had been assimilated by Lin Ling. In the spiritual light city, there were tens of thousands of experts who had been assimilated by Lin Ling. Moreover, this group of people had personally witnessed Lin Ling's invincible might when he defeated the great god of the spirit nation. Therefore, even without the human king's flame, their respect for Lin Ling came from the bottom of their hearts. Swoosh! Their neat and tidy salutes, coupled with the identical invitation letters, undoubtedly caused the entire hall to fall into silence. Those from the Seventh Emperor Alliance had their jaws dropped to the ground. Previously, they had mocked Lin Ling for not having an invitation letter. But now... Chapter 4172. So many invitations. Sigh, I'm getting tired of taking them all. At that moment, Lin Ling said helplessly, there are too many, and we can't use them all. By the way, Seventh Prince, do you want any? If you want, feel free to take them. The Seventh Prince felt as if he was suffocating, unable to move up or down. How could he compare to Lin Ling in terms of invitations? That was obviously impossible. Moreover, he could not understand why this group of people would give face to Lin Ling. Among this group of people, he knew that many of them were reputable figures. Even if these people wanted to befriend Lin Ling, they would not go so far as to give him an invitation. The preciousness of an invitation letter was more important than any kind of friendship. For a moment, the seventh prince fell silent. He felt a burning pain on his face, and a great humiliation floated in his heart. Sorry, I don't like to bring invitations. Why should I bring them with me all the time when I'm just using them to wipe my ass? When I really need them, someone will definitely deliver them. Then, Lin Ling looked at the barrier masters and said. The barrier masters opened their mouths wide, and they were so angry that they were in a mess. However, they also knew that this upstart young man was not simple to be able to get an invitation from someone else. Now that Lin Ling also had an invitation, they obviously could not stop Lin Ling from entering. Pah! At that moment, the door suddenly opened. Then, 3 figures appeared. They were 2 old women and a young woman. After they walked out, they looked at the crowd coldly. What happened? Why is it so noisy outside the door? The woman seemed to have a high status as she spoke coldly. Princess Tian. The barrier masters immediately bowed respectfully to Princess Tian. They knew that this Princess Tian was the spokesperson of Miao Shen's true teachings. Moreover, her master was also an extremely terrifying existence. Princess Tian. The 7th prince also noticed that someone had come. The humiliation from before disappeared in an instant. Instead, he almost laughed out loud. It was really like someone giving him a pillow when he was sleepy. He knew that Princess Tian and Lin Ling had always been enemies. Now that Lin Ling wanted to enter Miao Shen's true teachings, even if he had an invitation, as long as the Princess Tian said a word, Lin Ling would definitely run away. He was even imagining how he would laugh at Lin Ling when Lin Ling ran away. Someone wants to enter Miao Shen's true teachings, but he is too arrogant, so he blocked the door. Then the 7th prince pointed his finger at Lin Ling's words. He knew that Miao Shen's true, Lin Ling's the way. Princess Tian frowned and looked in the direction the 7th prince was pointing at. When she saw the blue-robed young man, her body unnoticeably trembled. It was Lin Ling. Her mind was filled with thoughts in an instant. She never thought that Lin Ling would come here. With the hatred between Lin Ling and Princess Tian, plus the fact that Lin Ling had offended her master, Lin Ling dared to come to Miao Shen's true teachings. He was courting death. She subconsciously wanted to sneer and give Lin Ling a heavy blow. However, at this moment, an image appeared in her mind. When she encountered the greatest humiliation in her life, a hero descended from the sky with lightning blooming, a ghostly face, and saved her from the evil smiling old men. That hero was a shadow that she could never erase. Most importantly, that hero quietly merged with the man she hated the most in her life. It's me. Princess Tian's heart suddenly became conflicted. He is Lin Ling. Seeing Princess Tian's expression constantly changing, the 7th prince thought that Princess Tian was angry, which made him laugh even more excitedly. Princess Tian. He is the one who is causing trouble. The few barrier masters seemed to have noticed the grudge between Princess Tian and the blue-robed young man, so they added insult to injury. Slap. However, as soon as they finished speaking, a crisp slap landed on their faces. What are you doing? Who asked you to stop them? Princess Tian stared at the barrier masters and said coldly. Ah! The barrier masters were stunned. The 7th prince was stunned. The 7th Emperor Alliance was also stunned. What the fuck is going on? Princess Tian, Lin Ling is an arrogant person. He has humiliated you many times. Don't you think you should do something about it? The 7th prince gritted his teeth, but he forcefully swallowed them back into his stomach and braced himself to ask. Princess Tian, Lin Ling is an arrogant person. He has humiliated you many times. Don't you think you should do something about it? Are you blind? Let me ask you, does he have an invitation letter? Princess Tian immediately looked at the 7th prince with a cold expression. Yes. The 7th prince replied instinctively. That's right. What else do you want? Do you want to cause trouble? Or do you think that Miao Shen's true inheritance doesn't exist? Let me tell you, 7th prince, don't cause trouble in Miao Shen's true inheritance. Otherwise, even the gods behind you won't be able to protect you. Princess Tian's voice became even colder. The seventh prince's jaw dropped. Although he was not familiar with Princess Tian, they had worked together a few times. Now, Princess Tian was not fierce to Lin Ling, but she was fierce to him? Who was the enemy here? And the few of you, are you blind as well? Can't you see that he has an invitation letter? Princess Tian then said to the barrier masters, scaring them so much that their faces turned pale. Do you know who he is? He is the trial taker of the current era. The heavenly princess continued to speak. Every time she spoke, the bodies of those world spiritists would tremble. Challenger? Trial taker of God? Of course they knew what it meant. He was the spokesperson of the gods, and his status was higher than that of the final world city lord. Moreover, he is the heavenly voice of God. The heavenly princess did not stop until she was shocked to death. Plop! The barrier master's legs went soft, and they directly knelt down. Not only was he a trial taker, but he was also the heavenly voice of God among the trial takers. One had to know that the so-called heavenly voice of the gods was someone who had completed 5 trial missions and had already met the gods. If they angered this young man and he spoke ill of them in front of the gods, even Miao Shen's true inheritance would not protect them. After all, they were just ordinary barrier masters. The more they thought about it, the more terrified they became. Their eyes were wet, and they almost cried. All of you, stay in order and come in obediently. Princess Tian's gaze swept across the crowd, and her majesty was extremely strong. This was also the reason why all the forces gave her face even though she was not strong. Now, this majesty was clearly displayed. Then, Princess Tian looked at Lin Ling with a complicated gaze, but she did not say anything. She turned around and entered the red sandalwood door. Outside the door, there was only silence. No one had expected such an outcome, and even Lin Ling hadn't expected it. Of course, he didn't think too much about it. After all, as far as he was concerned, the heavenly princess was a crazy woman that could do anything. Now that she was helping him, it might be a trap. Of course, he did not think too much about it, but the seventh prince's imagination was running wild. It was as if he had become stupid. Chapter 4173. He was shocked by the thought. Then, he shook his head and threw the thought out of his mind. In his opinion, unless the heaven and earth merged, it would never happen. Let's go in. Lin Ling led Yu and the others through the red sandalwood door. Of course, before entering, he suddenly stopped and looked at the barrier masters who were sitting on the ground. Am I still a country bumpkin? Lin Ling asked. No. Those boundary masters immediately shook their heads like rattle drums. Now, do you still want my invitation? Lin Ling asked again. Don't. They shook their heads even harder. Then if I'm not a country bumpkin, who is? Lin Ling asked one last time. The few boundary masters' expressions changed, and their eyes continued to flicker. They did not understand why Lin Ling would ask such a question. I'll ask again. Who is a country bumpkin? Seeing this, Lin Ling's voice turned cold. I know. Perhaps it was because it was too cold and majestic. The barrier masters finally reacted. They pointed at the seventh prince and the others and said, They are country bumpkins. You're courting death. The people from the Seventh Emperor Alliance were infuriated. These good-for-nothings had betrayed the Seventh Emperor Alliance because of Lin Ling. Very well. Seeing this, Lin Ling laughed loudly and entered through the red sandalwood door. The barrier masters felt as if they had just been given a new lease of life. They had only guessed Lin Ling's intention after being interrogated by him. He wanted to use them to mock the Seventh Emperor Alliance, and that was indeed the case. However, they had offended the Seventh Emperor Alliance. This made them smile bitterly. Of course, even if they were given another choice, they would still choose to betray the Seventh Emperor Alliance. After all, the Seventh Emperor Alliance was not to be trifled with. However, they could see that Lin Ling was not to be trifled with. Moreover, Princess Tian seemed to be speaking for Lin Ling. You have guts. The members of the Seventh Emperor Alliance were enraged. They wanted to use these boundary masters to teach Lin Ling a lesson, but in the end, the Seventh Emperor Alliance lost face. Lin Ling, on the other hand, did not take what had happened before to heart. He was still inside the red sandalwood door with Yu and the others. Behind the door was a luxurious hall. However, as they walked forward, the The scenery around them constantly changed. Spring went and autumn came. Flowers withered and bloomed. For a moment, the surrounding scenery turned into a sea of white clouds. But for a moment, the scorching sun hung high in the sky. A moment later, winter snow drifted over, and the whole world was wrapped in silver. Most importantly, this wasn't just a simple visual reaction, but also a physical reaction. The autumn wind blew gently, and it was a little cool. The spring rain fell on people's bodies, making them feel cold. Everything was vivid and lifelike. So beautiful. Yu and the others were also shocked by this scene, and their eyes flickered. Lin Ling immediately nodded his head. I guess we should be in a divine artifact now. All this time, he was not familiar with God Miao's true inheritance. However, after seeing it today, he finally understood why the gods gave face to God Miao's true inheritance. The big boss behind God Miao's true inheritance was indeed quite capable. Ha! As they walked forward, some naked big men began to appear around them. They wore beast skins and began to forge bronze cauldrons, ancient buildings, altars, and other things. In the beginning, these forged items were very crude, but as time passed, they gradually became more refined, and in the end, they became mythical. They used altars, bronze cauldrons, ancient bells, ancient bronze trees, and other things to pray to the heavens for power. They borrowed the power of wind, fire, and the sea to explode with each forging. Sometimes, they failed, and the storm would drown them, and the earth would become a catastrophe, killing everything. However, when everything calmed down, they would get busy again and continue to forge bronze cauldrons and other things. They failed again and again, and finally, they gradually succeeded. This should be the most primitive form of a boundary master. And Yu seemed to have seen something and said in shock. Never would I have thought that the path of a boundary master would be so ancient. Lin Ling nodded his head. Suddenly, he saw that this group of people encountered an old man. That old man carefully gave guidance to this group of people, greatly increasing their path of boundary masters. The melody of the great Tao began to appear in the things they forged. This also allowed this group of people to slowly walk to the peak, standing in the ancient era of gods. However, a nameless gale came and caused this group of people to die. In the end, only a few people survived. Compared to their ancestors, these people were much more low-key. They secretly passed down the skills left behind by their ancestors. Until now. It seems that this group of people did not have it easy to reach this far. It seems that they leaked the secrets of the heavens, and that's why they suffered a great calamity. However, who is the old man that taught them? He's so powerful. Yu and the others looked at the surrounding scene and kept guessing. On the other hand, Lin Ling recalled the scene when the old man appeared. Although the old man had only appeared for a short time, he had said, "The primordial chaos has yet to be divided, transforming into a primordial light. This is the primordial ancestral chi of the highest supreme, and its name is Tao." This sentence sounded familiar to Lin Ling, as if he had heard it somewhere before. "Brother Lin Ling, what's wrong?" Yu asked when she saw Lin Ling's absent-minded look. "I remember now." And at this time, Lin Ling finally had some impression. In the past, he came from Wuxia. At that time, he was bored of studying. Therefore, he had always studied the myths and legends of Wuxia. He was also very curious and yearned for them. Only then did Lin Ling remember what the old man had said. He had once seen it in an ancient book in Wuxia. The primordial chaos has yet to be divided, transforming into a primordial light. This is the primordial ancestral chi of the highest supreme, and its name is Tao. It is also known as the highest supreme Tao. This also meant that the old man who taught the skills was the ruler of the great Tao, the ancestor of Taoism, Taishang Lao Jun. Thinking of this, Lin Ling smiled bitterly and said, "If these stories are true, then the person that the ancestors of this group of people met was Taishang Lao Jun. He was the one who taught this group of people the true great Tao of enchantment." Taishang Lao Jun? Yu and the others were shocked. This is a deity from ancient times. I'm afraid not many people know his name. Lin Ling shook his head and said, if it was in the past, he would have thought that it was some kind of rumor. However, he had met Patriarch Bodhi, so he was a little bit sure. Ancient times? Lin Ling, is this an era even older than the era of the deities? And Yu was even more surprised. She did not expect Lin Ling to know this. Yes, in fact, there was an era before the ancient times. It was also the era when the world was created. It was called the Primordial Chaos Era. Lin Ling nodded and said, Brother Ling, could it be that you are an ancient deity? How do you know all this? Yu and the others stared at Lin Ling in disbelief. Lin Ling smiled bitterly and said, These are just my guesses. They may not be accurate. Chapter 4174. In front of the Green Mountain, a white-clothed woman was sitting there, indifferently looking at Lin Ling and the others. The woman was sitting in a very dignified manner. Beside her was a small wooden table. On the wooden table was an exquisite vase with fresh flowers in it, adding a touch of elegance to the scene. Looking at the woman, she was around 30 years old, but she had a graceful bearing and a dignified aura. The white robe she wore was embroidered with exquisite dragon patterns. Those dragon patterns would occasionally emit light, making her look extremely extraordinary. That was a supreme dragon robe. It signified that the status of a world spiritist was a supreme position. Beside the woman stood two people. One of them was Princess Tian. At that moment, she was looking at Lin Ling with a complicated gaze. Unfortunately, Lin Ling ignored her. The other person was a man in his 20s. He didn't look old, but his eyes were calm and he had a superior demeanor. That man's long hair draped over his shoulders. He was also wearing a large robe. When the robe draped over the ground, it made him look somewhat lazy. However, his robe was embroidered with golden patterns. Clearly, he was a Supreme Dragon Robe with golden patterns. Supreme Dragon Robe represented a title that surpassed World Spiritist God. They were respectively golden, dragon, and purple. According to legend, purple was the most prominent. In the entire Miaoshen's true inheritance, and even in the entire Universal Void, there were no more than 3 people with such a title. In the past, there was also a Supreme Dragon Robe with golden patterns by Princess Tian's side. However, at that time, Lin Ling didn't show any respect at all. He directly beat that guy up in front of Princess Tian. That was how the grudge between him and Princess Tian came about. Lin Ling, long time no see. At that moment, the white-clothed woman said indifferently, Long time no see. Lin Ling's eyes flashed. He was sure that this was the first time he had seen that woman. However, she said long time no see? That meant that she had seen him before. Could she be the woman with the proud son of heaven that he had met at Taoist Wabao's place? Long time no see. Lin Ling immediately smiled and nodded. Lin Ling, how dare you be so rude to our heavenly snow world spiritist god? You should know that this is Miaoshen's true inheritance. Suddenly, the long-haired man beside the woman shouted coldly. His eyes were like lightning as he attacked Lin Ling. Lin Ling instantly felt that the man's strength wasn't much weaker than his. If they were to fight, Lin Ling would have to use his full strength to defeat him. However, the other party was a world spiritist god. One's overall strength did not depend on one's appearance but on one's treasures. Thus, the other party's strength was unfathomable. I am the trial taker of the Thunder God, and I only bow to the Thunder God. And where? Senior brother Dragon Fong. Princess Tian suddenly shouted. The man was surprised as he didn't understand why Princess Tian would speak for Lin Ling. Dragon Fong, forget it. Give some face to Mr. Lei Gong. At that moment, the white-clothed woman waved her hand and asked the man to bow. She didn't say anything else. However, her cold eyes were still looking at Lin Ling. Lin Ling had repeatedly opposed Miaoshen's true inheritance. Dragon Fong naturally knew that. Originally, he wanted to find an opportunity to teach Lin Ling a lesson. However, who knew that Lin Ling would send himself to the door? If it wasn't for Heavenly Snow World Spiritist God's words, Dragon Fong would definitely take action. Lin Ling, you seem to be very familiar with the matters of the ancient era. The white-clothed woman looked at Lin Ling and asked. She naturally heard the conversation between Lin Ling and Yu. She never thought that Lin Ling would know about the boundary primogenitor. Even she knew that the old man who taught the Great Tao was a real person. However, she didn't know the origin of the latter. Moreover, she knew that no one in Miaoshen's true inheritance knew about it. I know a thing or two. Lin Ling nodded. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord you mentioned before, does this senior really exist? The white-clothed woman's eyes were filled with curiosity. Of course. Lin Ling smiled. In fact, he wasn't 100% sure. However, He believed that the white-clothed woman knew even less than him. Therefore, it didn't matter if he bragged. This ancient great god was the boundary primogenitor, and also the Tao primogenitor. He taught countless great Taos and was the first boundary master of the Grand Mist era. He had an 8 trigrams furnace. There was nothing that he couldn't refine and forge. He had forged many famous divine tools and treasures, such as the golden cudgel, the 9-tooth rake, and the golden cudgel. Among them, the Vajra bracelet can absorb any divine artifact, and the golden banded staff is even more of a stabilizing force. Lin Ling spoke frankly with assurance, causing the white-clothed woman's eyes to shine brighter and brighter. When Dragon Fong saw Lin Ling's appearance, he couldn't help but feel angry. He thought that Lin Ling was bragging. After all, Miao Xin's true inheritance gathered the #1 great Tao of the void. If this grand supreme elderly lord really existed, how could they not know about it? However, soon, Lin Ling stopped talking halfway. That's all? When the white-clothed woman saw that Lin Ling stopped talking, she suddenly frowned. Senior, I came to Miao Xin's true inheritance to buy things, not to tell stories. If you want to listen to my story, you have to pay something. Lin Ling reminded her with a smile. When others came to Miao Xin's true inheritance to forge treasures, the price was very high. Therefore, since the white-clothed woman wanted to listen to his story, Lin Ling naturally had to ask for some compensation. Hearing this, the white-clothed woman snorted in her heart. With her seniority, others would be eager to work for her. However, Lin Ling was raising the price. He didn't put her in his eyes at all. Then what are you doing here? The white-clothed woman asked indifferently. I'm here to buy the divine spring. Lin Ling also stated his purpose. Lin Ling, you should know that our Miao Xin's true inheritance only sells divine tools. We don't sell treasures. In fact, we buy any treasures. The white-clothed woman refused. You should have seen the people of Miao Xin's true inheritance in the major forbidden areas. Therefore, as long as there are treasures, I will fight for them. By the way, last time at Taoist Wabao's place, you stole my map of the 8 gods' heavenly palace. I haven't settled this matter with you yet. I see. Lin Ling suddenly stroked his chin. However, there are always exceptions to everything. I have always believed that there is no transaction in the world that cannot be done. It mainly depends on the bargaining chip. Humph, Lin Ling, you really have a bargaining chip with our Miao Shen? Do you think you can compare to our Miao Shen's true inheritance? Hearing this before the white-clothed woman could speak, Longya snorted disdainfully. I want a divine spring in exchange for divine stones. Lin Ling ignored him and said indifferently. Divine stones? Chapter 4175. Dragon Fong was also surprised by Lin Ling's generosity. He had taken out 1 divine stone to trade. However, he snorted disdainfully. It's not 1, it's 100. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Lin Ling also spoke calmly. Silence. Dragon Fong's pupils constricted. Princess Tian looked at Lin Ling in disbelief. Even the white-robed woman stared at Lin Ling in shock. 100 divine stones was no small matter. If given to a martial god realm expert, they would be able to produce at least 30 strands of divine force. Those with good talent and strong refining ability might even be able to produce 40 strands of divine force. This meant that with this batch of divine stones, an ordinary martial god realm expert could instantly become an expert. As for the divine spring, although it was rare, it was not without substitutes. For example, as long as one had enough royal crystals, their power would not be weaker than royal crystals. However, the amount of royal crystals required was too large. It would take a long time to gather enough. 100 divine stones? Are you kidding? Dragon Fong said word by word. Do I look like someone who would joke? Lin Ling finally looked at Dragon Fong with disdain. Don't tell me that 100 divine stones have scared you. You're a boundary master of God Miao's true inheritance. You shouldn't be so narrow-minded. Such a rhetorical question was undoubtedly sarcastic. Dragon Fong suddenly gritted his teeth and was unable to speak. After all, 100 divine stones was not a small amount for him. You're really a frog at the bottom of a well. Seeing Dragon Fong's silence, Lin Ling muttered to himself. Although 100 divine stones is indeed a large amount, The rules of God Miao's true inheritance cannot be ignored. At this time, the white-robed woman said again. She was still stubborn. Plus 10 indigo spiritual flowers. Lin Ling shouted again. Swoosh. This time, the white-robed woman gasped. When she looked at Dragon Feng again, he opened his mouth wide. Naturally, they knew what the indigo spiritual flower was. It could be said that there was no such spiritual flower in the entire void. Only the Spirit Nation had it. If one wanted to obtain the blue spiritual flower from the Spirit Nation, they would have to join them. However, the true disciple of Miao Shen had never participated in any power struggles. Naturally, he would not join the Spirit Nation. Therefore, the true disciples of Miao Shen didn't have many sapphire spirit flowers. What do you think? Seeing the drastic change in their expressions, Lin Ling questioned indifferently as if he was the host. This was the territory of God Miao's true inheritance, which was also the place with the most treasures in the void. However, Lin Ling had used his heroic spirit to intimidate God Miao's true inheritance. Are you sure you want to exchange 1 divine spring with 100 divine stones and 10 scarlet flowers? Do you know what the treasure you took out represents? After recovering from his shock, Longya spoke solemnly. He was somewhat doubtful that Lin Ling had these treasures. Rich, willful. Lin Ling didn't explain anything. His words dispelled their suspicions. There was no reason. It was because he was rich. At this moment, the white-robed lady and the other two felt as if there was a huge rock in their hearts. They couldn't move up or down and felt uncomfortable. All right, if you take out the map of the 8 gods' celestial palace, I'll give you the divine spring. In the end, the white-robed lady made a decision. Senior, I'm rich and willful. However, it doesn't mean that I can pay for anything. Money doesn't matter. However, the map isn't money. Therefore, it's impossible. Lin Ling shook his head and refused without hesitation. If you don't take out the map of the 8 gods' celestial palace, you won't be able to get the divine spring. Moreover, I can tell you that in the entire void, only God Miao's true inheritance has such a treasure. The white-robed lady looked at Lin Ling with burning eyes. She was determined to get the map of the 8 gods' celestial palace. After all, she knew that the 7th level of the 8 gods' celestial palace had many treasures that God Miao's true inheritance needed. Subsequently, just as she was about to speak, Lin Ling spoke before her. He said indifferently, I've already named the price. I'll give you the time it takes for an incense stick to burn to consider. Ah! The white-robed lady's eyes narrowed. Dragon Feng and Princess Tian's hearts skipped a beat. Because, shouldn't those words be said by world deity Tian Shui? In an instant, they were all astonished. However, after the white-robed lady recovered from her astonishment, she looked at Lin Ling coldly. As for Lin Ling, he looked back at her indifferently. It was as if they were having a peak confrontation. It was as if they wanted to see a hint of compromise in each other's eyes. Obviously, they didn't want to give in. Their gazes collided in mid-air, creating invisible sparks. Even the heavenly princess and Yu could feel the invisible pressure. They felt suffocated and felt suffocated. Time seemed slow, but it also seemed to have passed in an instant. Time's up. Goodbye. Finally, a voice broke the silence. It was as if an ice cube that had been frozen for 10,000 years had been broken. The voice came from Lin Ling. After saying that, he turned around and left. Looking at Lin Ling's departure, the white-robed lady frowned. Finally, she compromised and said coldly, Wait. If you tell us the secret of the ancient era, I can give you a chance to get the holy spring. Remember, it's just a chance. After all, the true inheritance of Miao Shen can only buy treasures, but not trade them. On the other hand, divine weapons can be traded at any time. As for the holy spring, whether you can get it depends on your ability. Deal. Yu and the others immediately looked at Lin Ling. Lin Ling stood quietly as if he was thinking about something. Then he said, You're not playing any tricks, are you? Humph, the true inheritance of Miao Shen won't destroy our reputation for 100 divine stones. Hearing that, the white-robed lady snorted coldly. Okay, you win. Deal. Lin Ling finally turned around and nodded. However, the white-robed lady shook her head and said, No one has ever threatened the true inheritance of Miao Shen, and the true inheritance of Miao Shen has never made an exception. You're the first, so you win. Obviously, She also knew that the treasures that Lin Ling took out had tempted the true inheritance of Miao Shen, especially the sapphire spiritual flower. The true inheritance of Miao Shen was currently refining an ancient elixir that could improve the divine fetus of a warrior and give birth to a divine fetus. It was comparable to the divine inheritance that was sold in the divine shop of the four great deities. What such an ancient elixir lacked was the sapphire spiritual flower. If such an elixir could be refined, the structure of the void in the 9 regions would be changed. At that time, a large number of divine fetus holders would appear. The true inheritance of Miao Shen would be famous throughout the ages. This was because the true inheritance of Miao Shen could refine the divine fetus elixir that only existed in the era of the deities. Chapter 4176. In the distance, the fog was hazy. 9 mountains could be vaguely seen sitting on the ground, as if 9 giants were standing between heaven and earth. Lin Ling looked over as well. Immediately, he sensed an ancient power within the 9 mountains. It was like the might of the heavens. The 9 mountains are sacred mountains from the era of gods. I don't know why they fell into the void and were brought here by Miao Shen's true disciples. The holy spring of Miao Shen's true disciples comes from this mountain. The white-robed woman said lightly. Miao Shen's true disciples are really rich. With such a treasure, aren't you afraid that the 4 great gods will be jealous? Hearing that, Lin Ling suddenly smiled faintly. Humph, Lin Ling, don't try to drive a wedge between us. The white-robed woman immediately snorted. Miao Shen's true disciples seem to be sitting on a treasure, but you have to know that the spirit array Tao is created by countless treasures. Only through failure and failure can one finally succeed. Do you think the process of failure doesn't have to pay a price? The holy spring is the price of failure. The price of failure. That's my negligence. Lin Ling shrugged. Now, how do I enter the mountain? Which mountain has the holy spring? These 9 mountains all have the holy spring. However, some have just been born, and some have a large amount of holy spring. How to choose is up to you. After saying that, the white-robed woman turned and left. Up to me? Lin Ling recalled the white-robed woman's words and instantly knew that it would be difficult to obtain the holy spring. However, there were risks and rewards. Because from the white-robed woman's words, Lin Ling also knew that if he chose the right direction, he might get more than 1 holy spring. This was also a gamble. I don't like to gamble. Lin Ling shook his head and helplessly spread out his hands. Brother Ling, didn't you rely on gambling your whole life to make a name for yourself? Yu next to him said with a smile. Hearing that, Lin Ling curled his lips. Although he didn't like to gamble and preferred to take 1 step at a time, his life was often out of his control. He had to risk his life to rush to the sky. The sacred mountain of the era of gods. After that, Lin Ling did not act rashly. Instead, he quietly investigated. After all, he'd paid so many treasures, so he didn't want to return empty-handed because of carelessness. Lin Bing Do Zhe Jia Zhen lie in front. This is the 9 words mantra. By borrowing the great Tao of the 9 words, it absorbs the essence of the world and condenses a divine spring. Among the 9 mountains, which mountain will have its own harvest? Lin Ling sensed for a moment, but he could only get a rough idea, which made him feel extremely helpless. Just as he was about to make his choice, a familiar aura suddenly spread out from one of the mountains. This aura was well hidden, but it was extremely terrifying. It was like a demon god, a god of death. Broken sword. Lin Ling's body trembled. Others might not be familiar with this aura, but how could he not be? Wasn't this the broken sword in the scabbard? Speaking of which, ever since Lin Ling's strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, the tyrannical song sword could no longer help him. Sometimes, it was even inferior to the true inheritance dark sword. The only advantage that the tyrannical song sword had over the true inheritance dark sword was that it was hard. All this time, because Lin Ling had been busy, he had not been able to find the broken sword. He had never thought that he would meet the broken sword here. He remembered that Emperor God Zhonggang had once told Lin Ling that the scabbard was extremely powerful and contained a powerful divine power. However, it needed Lin Ling to activate it. It seems that my luck is not bad. Ha. Lin Ling couldn't help but lick his lips. It was rare to encounter it, so he definitely wouldn't miss it. Of course, God Miao's true inheritance had collected countless treasures from ancient times to the present, so it wasn't strange for it to have a scabbard. Without a doubt, Lin Ling would definitely choose the mountain with the broken sword. That mountain was also called Soldier Mountain. You, wait for me to come back. Ha ha. Then, Lin Ling said to Yu and the others. Immediately, he flew in the direction of the 9th mountain. A moment after Lin Ling left, two figures slowly walked over. They were Princess Tian and Dragon Fong. Have you made your choice? Hee, this Lin Ling is really bold. He actually used 100 divine stones to bet with the blue spiritual flower. One should know that if his luck wasn't good, he would become a joke. Dragon Fong said as he walked with his hands behind his back. What do you mean? An Yuer suddenly looked at him and said. Being stared at by an Yuer, Dragon Fong didn't know why his heart suddenly skipped a beat. This was because he realized that this woman in white was really beautiful, like an otherworldly goddess. Then, he explained, the number of holy springs in the 9th mountain varies. If Lin Ling goes to the divine mountain, which happens to be collected by God Miao's true inheritance, then Lin Ling will return empty-handed. If his luck is slightly better, he will go to some divine mountains that have been brewing for a period of time. Maybe he can get half a holy spring. It could be said that in the 9th mountain, only one mountain had a complete holy spring, so there was no pressure to collect it. In that case, Lin Ling will have to rely on his luck. An Yuer said. Dragon Fong nodded and then said with a smile. Of course, if Lin Ling's luck is extremely bad, then he will be unlucky. Because there is a divine mountain that even God Miao's true inheritance doesn't dare to approach easily. If Lin Ling goes there, not only will he return empty-handed, but he will also be haunted by bad luck. For a very long time. Bad luck. This time, Yu and the others were also surprised. Yes, God Miao's true inheritance once had a boundary god enter that divine mountain, but in the end, he returned in failure. In the following days, he was unlucky no matter what he did. When refining divine weapons, he failed again and again. Even if he failed, his hands and feet were blown off. There was another person who went to that divine mountain and died. At that time, God Miao's true inheritance was alarmed and used countless treasures to investigate. The result could only prove that the boundary god really fell to his death. Dragon Fong spoke with assurance. Fell to his death? Yu and the others all exclaimed. Not to mention powerful warriors, even mortals rarely fell to their deaths. This luck was too bad. Even more exaggerated, someone drowned in the latrine. Dragon Fong said again. You lied to us. At this time, Yu and the others couldn't believe it. How could there be such a strange mountain? Brother Dragon Fong is right. There were people who drowned in the latrine. We don't know why this happened, but those who were close to the mountain were really unlucky. Some even died from drinking water. These are all true. We, the true disciples of Miao Shen, also regard the mountain as a cursed mountain. Chapter 4177. Seeing her silly appearance, Yu and the others immediately looked in the direction that Princess Tian was pointing at, and their expressions immediately froze. That was because Lin Ling had gone to Bing Mountain, which was the cursed mountain. Ah, this guy, waha, he is really unlucky. Of all the choices, he actually chose that mountain. Is he an idiot? Long Ye was stunned at first. Then he burst into laughter. Because if he went to the cursed mountain, not only would he not be able to obtain the divine spring, he would also be plagued by bad luck. And this undoubtedly made God Miao's true disciples let out a big sigh of relief. As Lin Ling got closer and closer to Bing Mountain, many world spiritists in God Miao's true disciples also saw him. Even the white-robed woman saw him, and she could not help but laugh mockingly. As for the many world spiritists, they laughed unscrupulously. That was because they had also heard of Lin Ling, and this Lin Ling was very arrogant. He had repeatedly ruined the plans of God Miao's true disciples. If it was not for Lin Ling's background being too strong, they would have already made a move on Lin Ling. And now, God Miao's true disciples did not make a move, and Lin Ling instead went to seek his own bad luck. Is he an idiot? Of the 9 mountains, he actually chose the cursed mountain. Say, when he comes back with his tail between his legs, will he fall into the latrine and drown to death? Yes. You can't say that he is an idiot. Perhaps he knows that Soldier Mountain has the most divine springs, so he deliberately went there. However, although there are many divine springs, until now, no one has been able to obtain divine springs from Cursed Mountain. Ha ha. Ha ha. I fear that he was scared off before even seeing the divine spring. According to what I know, Grandmaster Lu has been there before. The pressure there is extremely great, and it is all a mysterious power that doesn't fear divine force, divine embryo, world essence, and other defenses. Yes. Let's wait and see this trial challenger Lin Ling Lu's face. Yes. Many world spiritists stopped their work and looked at the distant 9-layer mountain from the mountain range. As for some of the cultivators who came to buy treasures, at this moment, after hearing the conversation of the masters, they naturally understood the 9-layer mountain, and then laughed loudly. Among them were the 7th prince and the others. What an idiot! The 7th prince put his hands behind his back and said with a smile on his face. At this moment, he seemed to have forgotten that not long ago, Lin Ling had crippled his balls and humiliated him in public. Of course, after the 7th prince's mocking voice, another mocking voice rang out from the other side. Lin Ling, not only did you overestimate yourself, you're also very stupid. This time, the one who spoke was naturally Dragon Fong. He was all smiles as he quietly watched the show. It's still too early to say whether or not I've overestimated my capabilities. Yu and the others immediately refuted. However, the 7th prince obviously did not want to fight with them, because things would prove everything. At this moment, Lin Ling finally got close to Soldier Mountain. Upon closer inspection, he found that this mountain was majestic and unruly. It was as if it was a giant from ancient times, or a sword that soared into the sky. At the bottom of the ancient mountain, there was a winding path that was overgrown with weeds. It was as if this place had been abandoned by the world. There were no traces of human activity in this place. This made Lin Ling realize that no one had come to this mountain before. Pah! Lin Ling landed and appeared on the winding path. He looked forward and saw that the winding path went along the mountain and disappeared into the distance. It was as if following the winding path would lead him to the divine spring. Of course, Lin Ling also knew that this seemingly simple path would be filled with endless twists and turns. In fact, when Lin Ling took a step forward, a mysterious force enveloped him. The air seemed to ripple, and Lin Ling felt as if he had entered a mysterious domain. Moreover, what shocked Lin Ling was that he tried to use his realm essence, divine power, and even his physical strength to resist, but the force was not affected at all. It still lingered around Lin Ling's body. This is the steps of God, and it is demonic. At this moment, a palm-sized giant ghost floated out of Lin Ling's chest. It stared ahead and then retreated. The power of the divine stares, and the demonic chi is too dense. I have to avoid it. The steps of God was a force that surpassed divine power. Coupled with the strange and varied nature of this force, the giant ghost was naturally unable to resist it. Okay. Lin Ling nodded. He guessed that this force came from the broken sword. The force that the broken sword emitted had always been strange. It was both demonic and murderous. At this moment, it was preventing anyone from approaching it. If it was any other time, Lin Ling would naturally not want to provoke this strange force. However, he had the scabbard, so he was not afraid. Instead, he tried to sense the broken sword and let the scabbard communicate with the broken sword. However, the broken sword had probably been here for millions of years, so it did not seem to sense the scabbard. While Lin Ling was sensing, the people in the distance laughed. In their opinion, Lin Ling was already unable to move an inch. He even regretted choosing this mountain. As for the world boundary deities of God Miao's true inheritance, they had a look of disdain. Because until now, no one from God Miao's true inheritance had obtained the divine spring from Bing Mountain. A mere Lin Ling wanted to get a share of it? He was simply overestimating himself. The force emitted by Bing Mountain is not simple. He will not be able to take the first step. Beside Princess Tian and the others, Longya laughed and said with incomparable confidence, I estimate that in less than an incense's time, he will run away with his tail between his legs. However, before he finished speaking, the blue-robed young man at the foot of the mountain had already taken a step. This gentle movement undoubtedly caused all the laughter to disappear in an instant. He took a step. At first, I also wanted to take a step, but in the end, I failed. How could he succeed? Some world boundary deities said with jealousy. As the famous cursed mountain of God Miao's true inheritance, some pretentious world boundary masters naturally wanted to challenge it to prove themselves and shock others. Of course, most of them failed. Longya was incomparably confident before, but Lin Ling instantly gave him a resounding slap, causing him to be stunned for a moment. However, very quickly, he said indifferently, "You have some ability, but that's all. Because, I also wanted to challenge the Cursed Mountain, but in the end, I only took 5 steps." "Senior Xianxia, you also went to challenge it? And you only took 5 steps?" Beside him, Princess Tian was undoubtedly very surprised. Of course, as a world boundary master, we always like to challenge the difficulty. The Cursed Mountain is no exception. So, Lin Ling being able to take 1 step is also the limit. Xianxia nodded proudly. At that moment, his scattered long hair looked even more elegant. However, just as he finished speaking, his face froze. It was as if he had eaten feces. Because, Lin Ling at the foot of the mountain moved forward again. As if ignoring the bad luck and mysterious power, he took 5 steps in a row. Chapter 4178. This scene undoubtedly caused Dragon Feng's voice to become sharp, as if he had been slapped twice. However, it was only 2 slaps. "Hey, Brother Ling has walked more than 5 steps. Open your big dog eyes and see." At this time, Yu Yu pointed to the front and said. And this was the 3rd slap. Moreover, it was 3 crisp slaps. Dragon Feng could not help but open his mouth wide. He was so surprised that he could eat 5 duck eggs. Of course, it was not only him. In the mountains around the vast 9-layer mountain, countless noble boundary masters were also silent. Their ridicule and disdain were now replaced by surprise. Even on a distant mountain range, the white-robed woman stood there quietly, but her expression was incomparably wonderful. Could it be that he, who is not even a boundary master, has a more powerful soul power than the boundary master of God Miao's true inheritance? She naturally knew that the power emitted from Soldier Mountain could only be resisted by soul power. Moreover, it must be a powerful soul power. If Lin Ling was a world spiritist, she might have believed it a little. However, all the world spiritists in the entire void were gathered there, and Lin Ling was not among them. So, this was too inconceivable. Sure enough, this is the power of the God Steps. However, I can also use the God Steps, so I can resist a little. At this moment, Lin Ling did not know that he had caused a sensation in the entire God Miao's true inheritance. Countless boundary masters felt humiliated because of him. On the contrary, he relied on the powerful steps of wisdom to steadily move forward. Obviously, he did not care about the power around him. Instead, he cared about where the broken sword was. Watching Lin Ling walk faster and faster, God Miao's true inheritance became even more silent. Before, didn't someone say that Lin Ling would not be able to walk for long? And Yuer, who was beside Dragon Feng, suddenly said with a smile. Her words were full of sarcasm. Humph, it's just luck. He must have some treasure on him that can resist the mysterious power. Lin Ling is really sinister. However, this also means that he is not afraid of the power. However, if he is unlucky and encounters the legendary strange sword, he will be unlucky. Dragon Feng immediately snorted, his words full of jealousy. Ha ha! And Yuer and the others immediately chuckled. The ridicule in their laughter became even stronger. Because everyone knew that Dragon Feng was just trying to save face. Only a fool would believe his words. That's not right. Look, Brother Ling's luck seems to be really bad. That's because Brother Ling has already encountered that sword and has started to pick it up. At this moment, Yu Yu suddenly said something. Ah! Dragon Feng was taken aback. Then he rubbed his eyes hard. Next, his chin fell to the ground. At the foot of the distant mountains, Lin Ling's footsteps had already stopped. Moreover, he had found a broken sword, held it in his hand, and lightly played with it. This action also made the eyes of Miao Xin's true disciple fall to the ground. Only they knew that the reason why Soldier Mountain was a cursed mountain was because there was a mysterious evil sword. It could be said that it was a cursed sword. Originally, they thought that Lin Ling would definitely avoid that sword because those who saw that sword would either drown in the latrine or fall to their deaths while walking. Those who were lucky would also fail in everything they did. But who would have thought that Lin Ling would not be guilty if he did not know? Not only did he not avoid the cursed sword, but he also took the initiative to find it and picked up the evil sword. He will definitely fall into the latrine and drown to death. Compared to this, are we also unlucky? Because Lin Ling picked up the sword, we also saw the cursed sword. Quickly use the amulet to increase your luck and resist the bad luck. The true disciples of Miao Shen were all in chaos. At this moment, Lin Ling was standing at the foot of Soldier Mountain, looking at the violently trembling broken sword in his hand. Naturally, he could feel a terrible murderous and evil aura from the broken sword. This power seemed to have a spirit, and it was also cursing Lin Ling. Found you. However, Lin Ling was not afraid in the slightest. That was because the tyrannical Song sword had already fused with the scabbard. Thus, when he saw the broken sword, Lin Ling felt as if he had seen his companion, a lost companion. Everyone has been waiting for you. Then, Lin Ling said to the broken sword in his hand. The scabbard behind him also buzzed continuously, as if it was excited. However, the broken sword in his hand was still trembling, as if it still did not recognize Lin Ling. Chi! The broken sword even cut Lin Ling's palm, and a mysterious power rushed into Lin Ling's palm, crazily destroying everything. However, Lin Ling did not seem to notice it. He stared at the broken sword in his hand, took a deep breath and said, "This is my Lin Ling sword. It will always be my sword." After saying that, he threw the broken sword fragment, which was as thick as an arm, into the sky. Then, the dark and cold sword slowly circled and stabbed towards Lin Ling. Such an action undoubtedly shocked the entire 9th mountain. Lunatic. That was the only word people could use to describe it. Of course, if they had to use another word to describe it, it would be that he was too arrogant. Everyone knew that Soldier Mountain had bad luck. Once someone saw the demonic sword, they would have bad luck after coming out. They might even die from drinking water. However, what about Lin Ling? He actually threw the demonic sword and let it shoot down from above his head. Was he not courting death? One had to know that even if the demonic sword did not have bad luck, there was a 50% chance that Lin Ling would be stabbed to death by the sword. There was no doubt that everyone's hearts were in suspense. Their gazes were fixed on the demonic sword that kept circling down, and their breathing stopped. Swoosh! The demonic sword that everyone feared was emitting a tempting demonic sound as it slowly fell, and it was getting closer and closer to Lin Ling. Brother Ling! At that moment, Yu and the rest subconsciously shouted from afar. However, just as they finished speaking, the sword of Hex stabbed into Lin Ling's body. He's dead. Dragon Fong, who was beside them, immediately sneered because he had seen the scene in the distance with his own eyes. He was sure that Lin Ling was dead. Lin Ling, the divine heavenly voice of a generation, had fallen here. It's over just like that. Many people sighed when they saw that scene. They finally knew how terrible that bad luck was. In the beginning, many people even thought that falling into the latrine and drowning was a rumor. However, they believed it now because if the trial taker Lin Ling was killed in such a strange way, it would not be strange for him to drown in the latrine. The son of the undying demon, Lin Ling, actually died here. This kind of death is too tragic. The 7th prince was stunned for a moment, then said as if relieved of a heavy burden. However, just as he exhaled, his pupils suddenly narrowed, and then his pupils widened. The people around the 9th mountain, who had originally thought that the outcome was certain, suddenly became excited. Because in their eyes, Lin Ling moved as if he had come back from the dead. Then, he patted the huge sword behind him and moved forward again. This also made many people in the mountains give themselves a few hard slaps to see if this was a dream. Chapter 4179. No, look at the sword on his back. However, some people were more attentive and immediately noticed that something was wrong. Could it be that the cursed sword was inserted into the scabbard on his back? Finally, a dignified voice thundered into everyone's heart, causing many people to react in horror. At this moment, Lin Ling carried the big sword on his back and continued to move forward in an extremely good mood. Previously, when he threw the sword, he gambled on the 50% chance. If the sword deviated by a bit, it would be inserted into Lin Ling's head. If it deviated by a bit, it would be inserted into Lin Ling's scabbard. In fact, this was also a 1% chance. After all, the scabbard's opening was so small, who could guarantee that the evil sword would enter the scabbard? However, Lin Ling dared to gamble. Because he knew that if he wanted his lost companion to return, as the sword's owner, he should not be afraid of the sword and believe in his companion. Otherwise, he was not worthy of using the sword. Fortunately, at the last moment, the broken sword completely recognized Lin Ling. Look what happened. On the distant mountain range, the white-robed woman said lightly. Obviously, she did not see what happened. However, the 9-layer mountain was an important place, so Miaoxin's true inheritance had always been supervised by treasures to prevent the holy spring from being stolen. Open the mysterious yellow, she shouted in a low voice as her hands formed a complicated boundary. After the boundary was drawn in the air, a white horsetail whisk appeared in her hand and she gently waved it. The white clouds in the sky dispersed with a rumble, revealing 9 ancient mirrors. One of the mirrors absorbed the light of heaven and earth, reflecting a beautiful and blurry image that scattered on the ground. And those pictures were the scene after Lin Ling entered the Soldier Mountain. A master opened the mysterious yellow 9 mirrors. The boundary masters of Miaoxin's true inheritance exclaimed. Then, they curiously looked into the distance. In the reflection of the mirror, Lin Ling strode along the winding path and then picked up a broken sword. Then, he looked at it and threw the broken sword without any hesitation. Looking at the broken sword rolling in the sky and falling toward Lin Ling, such a scene once again frightened many people. Although people had seen such a scene before, they did not look carefully at that time. Now they could see how Lin Ling survived. Whoosh! The cold and evil demonic sword was getting closer and closer to Lin Ling. That sharp blade was about to claim Lin Ling's life at any moment. Everything was exactly the same as before. However, at this moment, the sword that was rolling up and down suddenly changed its trajectory. It was originally aimed at Lin Ling's head, but after rolling, it fell into the scabbard without missing a millimeter. All of this seemed to be magical, as if it was predestined by the unseen. Wow! Wow! After this clear scene, the endless green mountain was in an uproar. The mystery in everyone's hearts had been solved. The swords curse swords. Isn't he? After a moment of silence, a soft voice sounded from the green mountain, causing endless ripples in people's hearts. They cried out in their hearts. He dared to gamble with a 50% chance. This Lin Ling was indeed a madman. At this moment, Lin Ling did not know of the huge reaction outside. He walked along the winding path without any obstruction. After the broken sword was put away, the ancient power of the entire mountain range disappeared. Instead, the scabbard emitted bursts of joy. It was as if the broken swords were reunited, like brothers reuniting. 3 divine springs. Whoosh! Finally, Lin Ling stopped. In the distance, 3 clear springs sat on the ground, emitting rich spiritual energy. In the air above the springs, water droplets condensed in the void and slowly dripped down. However, the speed of condensation was very slow. It would take several years to condense a single drop. However, when the water droplets fell, ripples immediately appeared on the calm surface of the springs. Strands of spiritual energy spread out like ribbons. Good harvest. Whoosh! Staring at the 3 divine springs, Lin Ling licked his lips and immediately uprooted the divine springs. Even the soil was not spared. Then, he put them into his ring. After doing all this, Lin Ling seemed to have eaten a full meal. Then he turned around and left. He came out. Yes. At this moment, in the distance of the 9-layered mountain, people saw Lin Ling coming out with the big sword on his back. Their hearts inexplicably trembled. I did not expect him to succeed. Moreover, he obtained a lot of divine springs. Yes. On the mountain range, the white-robed woman's expression was somewhat complicated. Originally, according to her estimation, Lin Ling only had a 30% chance of obtaining the divine springs. At that time, the true disciples of Miao Shen would also be able to obtain a lot of treasures from Lin Ling. However, she had obviously miscalculated. Lin Ling used an unknown evil method to subdue the sword of curse, allowing him to obtain the divine springs without any hindrance. The divine springs in Bing Mountain had not been collected for many years, so there must be a lot of them. Most importantly, each of the divine springs had been filled for many years and were in a full state. Lin Ling, come here. Then, the white-robed woman shouted at Lin Ling in the distance. Lin Ling, who was at the foot of Bing Mountain, also looked up. Then, he saw the white-robed woman in the distance and immediately walked over. How many divine springs have you obtained? After a long time when she saw Lin Ling, the white-robed woman calmly asked. 3 woof. Lin Ling did not hide the truth. However, after he spoke, he clearly heard the white-robed woman gasp. In this regard, Lin Ling was not surprised. 3 divine springs. Such a harvest not only surprised the white-robed woman, but also Lin Ling himself. It could be said that the true disciples of Miao Shen had lost a lot of money this time. What's the matter with that broken sword? The white-robed woman asked again. Why? Does the true disciples of Miao Shen want to take back the sword? Hearing this, Lin Ling did not answer. Instead, he asked another question. That's not the case. The true disciples of Miao Shen have already investigated the sword. This broken sword is sharp and has spirituality. It is impossible for it to recognize a master. If you force it, the broken sword will self-destruct. Moreover, this broken sword also has an evil nature. Those who do not have a strong soul power will easily be affected by it and be plagued by bad luck. Today, it's better that you take the broken sword away. At least we can enter the divine springs in Bing Mountain to collect them at any time. The white-robed woman said. This sword is somewhat related to me. Although it has bad luck, I think I should be able to bear it. Since the true disciples of Miao Shen don't want it, then just give it to me. Lin Ling did not explain too much. Okay, but if you have bad luck, don't blame us for it. The white-robed woman nodded. She did not know that the broken sword was what Lin Ling wanted. Otherwise, she would have already raised the price. Although the Sword of Curse was a rare treasure, the true disciples of Miao Shen had investigated it for many years. Naturally, they knew that the power was not used by martial artists. As for Lin Ling, they estimated that they could not control that power. Chapter 4180. Here. Next, Lin Ling handed over a brocade pouch. Inside it were 100 divine stones and indigo spirit flowers. The white-robed woman took it and did not check it. Then she asked calmly, about the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord you mentioned, what kind of big shot is this? This was also the bargaining chip that Lin Ling had agreed to with her earlier. Lin Ling laughed secretly again. He did not expect that the mythical stories that he had read in his previous life could be used as bargaining chips. He smiled faintly and said, Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, one of the 3 great sect masters of the primordial age. He was in charge of the Ren school and had the ability to transform into the 3 pure ones. In today's martial arts, many martial arts and divine abilities were derived from his hands. Moreover, he was also recognized as the #1 person in the spirit array. The 3 great sect masters? The ancient era was so powerful? The white-robed woman's heart trembled, as if she believed what Lin Ling said. Lin Ling nodded slightly and pointed at the white-robed woman like a teacher. It's not the ancient era, but the primordial age. The experts of the ancient era, such as Sun Wukong, Erlang Shen, Neza, and so on, are actually the descendants of the ancient gods of the primordial age. I've never heard of these people. But, what are the 3 great sect masters you mentioned? The so-called 3 great sect masters, their orthodoxies are immortalized for hundreds of generations. 99% of today's martial arts are from their orthodoxies. They are the ancestor of Taoism, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, the Primordial Heavenly Lord, and the Sect Master of Jeschool, the Prime of Heaven. Lin Ling, are these ancient figures the strongest gods in the void? Also, you should know about the will of the world, right? What does it represent? Also, where did these great gods of the primordial age go? Faced with the white-robed woman's continuous questions, Lin Ling felt a little dizzy because he was just spouting nonsense. However, he had already bragged, so he had to continue pretending. The mysteries of the Grand Tao are beyond your imagination. What you've seen now is merely the tip of the iceberg. Even above the Grand Mist era there was another era, and that era was the era of creation. It was called the Desolate Era. At that time, everything had yet to become a spirit. The most powerful gods in the void. Lin Ling spoke frankly and frankly. Lin Ling's voice was like the sound of heaven as it spread through the boundless green mountains, causing countless world spiritists to widen their eyes as they carefully listened to what Lin Ling was saying. Bastard! Without a doubt, the 7th prince was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He did not know where Lin Ling had obtained these stories. He actually managed to frighten the world spiritist deity who looked down on true teachings to humbly ask for guidance. Since you're so good at bragging, why don't you go and brag? Dragon Fong was equally angry. He naturally didn't believe Lin Ling's words. What made him furious was that although he didn't believe it, many boundary masters in Miao Shen's true inheritance believed it. For example, world deity Tian Shui. If this continued, the true disciple of Miao Shen might break the ice with Lin Ling and make peace with him. Primeval age? I've never heard of this before. And that was indeed the case. At that moment, the white-robed woman was getting more and more curious. Of course, hidden in the dark, many masters in dragon-patterned robes were quietly listening. Even the purple-patterned robed master of Miao Shen's true inheritance was the same. For them, Lin Ling's words were too novel. It was as if he had revealed the secret of the great Tao. The untainted age is the most ancient age. In fact, Taishang Lao Jun, Heavenly Lord Yuanshi, and Tongti Hierarch are also the disciples of a great god. This great god is the incarnation of the will of heaven. His name is Hung Jun Ancestor. He is as famous as Pangu, the great god of creation, and as old as Nuwa, the mother of all things. The three great gods were the ancestors of the primeval age. They passed down the great Tao, opened the sky and created all things. Because I only know the general idea. What happened in the primeval age, only those ancient great gods knew. However, I guess that the will of the world and the will of the great Tao must be incompatible. This led to all the ancient great gods fighting against the will of the world, so they disappeared without a trace. Lin Ling said faintly. However, when he was bragging, he had also guessed something. Moreover, his mind suddenly roared. He remembered that when he was young, he had read a fairy tale. In it, there was a mysterious and ancient existence. That was the primeval spirit of creation. This primeval spirit of creation was only the will of the universe, not a living being. Moreover, it taught Hong Jun Ancestor. Could it be that the primeval spirit of creation was the will of the world? Thinking of this, Lin Ling's heart trembled. If that was the case, then who could fight against it? His random guess had undoubtedly frightened Tian Shui Great Boundary God so much that her face turned pale. The main reason was that she had once obtained a treasure in the secret realm. There were a few names recorded in the inscription. They were Pangu, Nuwa. This treasure was also the top secret of Miao Shen's true inheritance. Ordinary people wouldn't have access to it. She knew. However, a mere Lin Ling actually knew. Moreover, he said it clearly and logically as if he was the reincarnation of an ancient great god. Moreover, she agreed with Lin Ling's previous guess. Ancient great gods had monstrous strength. Why couldn't any of them be seen today? Perhaps they were really fighting against the will of the world. This was also the reason why the will of the world was so terrifying during the deities' era but had disappeared for so many years. Desolation era, primordial era, deities' era, and then our era? Are we also considered as the post-deities era? The white-robed lady muttered to herself. No, the void universe has been born for countless years. How could it be just a few short eras? As far as I know, the Desolation era was the creation of heaven and earth. The Primordial era was the awakening of all living beings. After that, it was the Deification era. In that era the gods were in chaos. An ancient great god, Xianxia, used the reputation of the ancient great god to open the deification list. With the deification list, he sealed the gods in the chaotic Primordial era, using order to make the world peaceful. Lin Ling said calmly. He told her about the deification of the gods and journey to the west that he had read when he was young. At this moment, in the endless mountain range of Miao Shen's true inheritance, there were boundary gods sitting cross-legged with their eyes opened. Some boundary gods stopped forging and some muttered to themselves. Deification. They only had this one sentence in their hearts. Suddenly, their minds lit up. It was as if they had found their past and present lives. However, this mysterious feeling quickly disappeared, causing their bodies to tremble. Could it be that they were a god in the primordial era? Had they entered the deification list? Now they had reincarnated. Rumble. At the same time, under the mountains, there was an ancient aura erupting. Someone had broken through. Then, a few more people broke through. What? Listening to Lin Ling's bragging, they actually broke through? Such a magical scene undoubtedly caused Long Ya and the seventh prince's jaws to hit the ground again. Even Princess Tian, Yu, and the others narrowed their eyes. They felt as if Lin Ling had sprinkled endless Tao. Those who listened to the Tao would instantly become gods. Chapter 4181. On the mountain peak where Lin Ling was, Tian Shui Great World Deity and Lin Ling were also shocked, especially Lin Ling. He was even more speechless than Yu and the others. Did they break through after listening to his boasting? However, He also realized that a warrior's breakthrough was dependent on the right time, right place, and right people. Those who broke through must have heard what he said and suddenly gained confidence, thinking that he was a reincarnated god. Therefore, with great courage and perseverance, they broke through the gate. There were so many people in the mountain, so it was normal for some of them to break through. Is this the so-called preaching of the great Tao? At this moment, the white-robed lady looked at Lin Ling in disbelief. At this moment, the blue-robed young man seemed to be shining with the light of a god. Lin Ling blushed when she looked at him. He said indifferently, "All right, I've given you what I should. Goodbye." "Wait, Lin Ling, who are you?" Tian Shui Great World Deity suddenly shouted. Her words made Lin Ling pause. He shook his head mysteriously and didn't say anything. He just turned around and left. "I'm the trial taker Lin Ling. That's all." A faint voice came out from Lin Ling's mouth and echoed in the mountain range. However, to those who believed in Lin Ling was even more unfathomable. He might be a reincarnated god from the ancient times. And for those who hated Lin Ling, it was Lin Ling who had pushed his pretentiousness to the limit, hiding his achievements and fame. Anger. The people of the Seventh Emperor Alliance were so angry that their teeth were itching. "Lin Ling, do you know the wood spirit queen of the Kai Yuan River? She's facing a great calamity now. Some people suspect that they are related to the will of the world. If you know them, you can go there now and save them." At this moment, Tian Shui Great World Deity's voice came again. Lin Ling nodded and didn't say anything. He called Yu and the others and left. Why is he so powerful? Looking at Lin Ling, who left casually, Princess Tian had a complicated expression. Her eyes were filled with reluctance. "Brother Lin Ling, I didn't expect you to be so talented in acting. You were fooled by Miao's true inheritance." After leaving Miao Shen's true inheritance, Yu and the others began to laugh like flowers blooming in the wind. "You're teasing me." Lin Ling smiled and stretched his hands towards Yu and the others' armpits, making them giggles. "Lin Ling, how do you know so many ancient myths?" And Yuer's cheeks were flushed, but she still looked at Lin Ling. "Ancient gods," he said. "The ancient ancients, the ancient times' stories, the story, the origin." Lin Ling looked at the endless sky with a complicated look in his eyes. If all of this was true, then Lin Ling had also walked out of the hometown of an ancient god. "Let's not talk about this. I heard from Miao Shen that the magical forest in the Kaiyuan River is a little dangerous." Then Lin Ling frowned. When he saw Yu and the others were puzzled, he immediately explained. Back then, when Lin Ling had just gone to the Kaiyuan River, he had helped the Wood Spirit Clan, Rock Spirit Clan, and Fire Spirit Clan in the magical forest. Now, according to Miao Shen's legend, they seemed to be in danger and were regarded as the will of the world. Since it was related to the will of the world, it was no small matter. Therefore, Lin Ling had to go and take a look no matter what. After hearing Lin Ling's words, Yu and the others immediately nodded. After they left the Tianzhou, they immediately moved forward along the void and headed straight for the Kaiyuan River. The Kaiyuan River was one of the forbidden areas in the 9 prefectures. There were endless secrets hidden in it. There were even rumors that on the other side of the Kaiyuan River was the hidden place of the dragon tribe. However, in the history of the 9 prefectures, not many people had managed to reach the other side of the river. Lin Ling was one of them. While they were hurrying, Lin Ling also checked the scabbard. Now, he had found another broken sword. The scabbard would definitely increase its power by a lot. As for the scabbard, Lin Ling never needed to comprehend it. As long as he found the broken sword, he would be able to display the power of the scabbard. Of course, although this method was fast, there was also a fatal danger. For example, if he didn't find the corresponding broken sword, the sword would kill its owner. Suddenly, a crisp sound rang out. The originally hot scabbard suddenly began to cool down. Lin Ling instantly knew that this was the reason why the broken sword had merged with the tyrannical song sword. Clang! Lin Ling immediately stopped and pulled out the sword. The new tyrannical song sword was even more majestic. On the huge sword body, there was demonic energy flowing like water. The visual impact was very strong. Realm essence was activated. With a boom, a powerful force exploded from Lin Ling's body, causing Yu and the others to fly backward. All of them looked at Lin Ling in shock. 100 strands of divine power. Lin Ling looked at the tyrannical Song sword in his hand in disbelief. He was extremely shocked. Although Emperor God Zhonggang had once said that this sword was extremely powerful and was the sword of the sword demon, Lin Ling never expected that just finding a broken sword would give birth to 100 strands of divine power. One had to know that currently, Lin Ling had only cultivated and comprehended more than 50 strands of divine power. It seemed that Lin Ling had more than 150 strands of divine power. With such strength, Lin Ling was undoubtedly one step closer to becoming one of the top 10 martial gods in the 9 prefectures. If I open my 7th dantian, I will definitely have the strength to fight against Luli Empress. Holding the magnificent sword, Lin Ling's heart was filled with heroism. Brother Ling. At this moment, Yu and the others also flew over and looked at Lin Ling in shock. Hee, this old friend, your strength has finally increased. Lin Ling immediately smiled and nodded. As he spoke, the tyrannical Song sword seemed to have sensed Lin Ling's voice. On the sword body, killing intent flowed like water from the sword tip to the sword hilt. It looked extremely beautiful. Lin Ling put away the tyrannical Song sword and patted the vines on his left shoulder. Now, among his companions, only little Kunlun's strength had not increased. However, in reality, little Kunlun was 1,000 times stronger than before. It was just that Lin Ling's strength had increased too quickly, so he felt that it was slow. However, if one were to take martial gods as an example, at least 60% of them would not be a match for little Kunlun. Let's go! Next, Lin Ling also increased his speed and rushed toward the Kaiyuan River. After a long time, a dazzling Milky Way appeared in the distance. Even though it was far away, Lin Ling and the others could still hear the rumbling sound of the river. They had arrived at the Kaiyuan River. Lin Ling's eyes immediately revealed a nostalgic look. It was here that he had obtained the inheritance treasure of the gods, and met the Kurishin of the 4 great gods. He had also brought the God Slayer alliance to its peak. It could be said that the Kaiyuan River was also the place that had allowed Lin Ling to completely transform. Of course, the most important thing was that this was the place where Lin Ling had brought Anuer back. And now, Lin Ling had come again. That's the Kaiyuan River. It was obviously the first time Yu and Xianxia had come here, so they could not help but be surprised. Chapter 4182. Without stopping, Lin Ling led the 3 ladies straight to the Kaiyuan River. Although the Kaiyuan River was huge, there was only one entrance. They could go through the entrance to reach the bottom of the Kaiyuan River. Stop! You can't enter the Kaiyuan River. When Lin Ling found the entrance, a loud shout came from the front. At this moment, the enormous entrance to the origin opening river was blocked by countless people, and all of these people were at the martial god realm. When Lin Ling was here last time, most of them were at the martial ancestor realm and half-step martial god realm. However, all of them were at the martial god realm now. There must be some secret hidden here. Who are you? Lin Ling spoke indifferently when he saw the group of people. It's none of your business. Get lost. Outside the entrance, an old man immediately shouted angrily. He didn't take Lin Ling seriously. Oh, what a beautiful lady. Not far away, a middle-aged man looked at Yu and the others with a lewd smile and licked his lips. His eyes were filled with evil intentions. Martial god Tianji, don't cause trouble. However, someone beside him advised him. We've been guarding this place for a year. It's been too boring. The middle-aged man shook his head and ignored that person's warning. Die! However, as soon as he moved, a black shadow immediately attacked him. It was extremely fast and charged into the middle-aged man's body. Then, the middle-aged man's body trembled and his face became distorted. Save me, save me! He cried out in pain. In the end, he stopped moving. A strange jellyfish swam out of his body with countless tentacles. Then, it flew back to Lin Ling. It was the evil ghost jellyfish. The evil ghost jellyfish was currently in the form of a divine fetus. How could the middle-aged man resist it? After it charged into the middle-aged man's body, it immediately devoured everything. The person who killed the middle-aged man was naturally Lin Ling. That was because the middle-aged man wanted to harm Yu and the others. In Tianzhou, there were people who harassed Yu and the others. However, Lin Ling didn't care because those people were too weak. Lin Ling didn't want to attack them. However, it was different now. Those people were all at the martial god realm. As a man, Lin Ling naturally wouldn't allow his wife to be humiliated in front of such experts. You've got guts. Everyone looked at him coldly when they saw that Lin Ling had killed a martial god realm expert without saying a word. You are the ones who are bold, Lin said coldly. Because at this moment, he was even more certain that something had happened in the demon forest. I ask you, why are you blocking the entrance? Who are you? Lin Ling said again. Ha ha ha. Outside the entrance, the martial gods laughed. Then, an old man who was sitting cross-legged slowly stood up. His aura was extremely terrifying. Behind him, a demonic shadow was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It turned into the shadow of a giant bat. It was obvious that it was a divine fetus talent. Moreover, it had reached the innate realm. A coffin floated not far from him. At that moment, the coffin slowly opened and a young man walked out. The young man's clothes were torn and there was a rotten smell on his body. When he opened his eyes, his gaze fell on Lin Ling as if he wanted to devour Lin Ling. Of course, this kind of power had no effect on Lin Ling. You don't deserve to talk to me. Before the old man could speak, the young man said coldly. His voice was filled with disdain. It was obvious that these two people were the leaders. Kid, I don't care who you are or who is behind you, but you can't interfere with what we want to do. You can't afford to offend the people behind us. I'll give you 3 breaths of time. Apologize and get lost immediately. I'll spare your life. The old man said coldly. Hearing this, Lin Ling laughed. Did the old man think Lin Ling was an idiot because he was young? The old man seemed to be letting Lin Ling go, but in fact, he was testing Lin Ling. If Lin Ling really apologized, the old man would probably kill Lin Ling immediately. This was because he saw that Lin Ling was afraid. Naturally, he knew that Lin Ling was guilty. Unfortunately, regardless of whether it was a test or not, Lin Ling was not afraid of them at all. He was not afraid at all. He wanted to know who was the mastermind behind the scenes who could summon this group of powerhouses. I'm talking to you because I'm giving you face. If I don't give you face, you'll definitely regret it. Lin Ling slowly pulled out the tyrannical song sword. The 6 dantians in his body started to roll quietly. I wonder how they'll regret it? Seeing that Lin Ling was about to make a move, everyone activated their boundary essence. Their eyes were filled with killing intent. That's death. Lin Ling finally made his move. There was no need for him to fuse his talents. He could crush the group of martial gods with his physical strength and boundary essence. Swoosh! With a slash of his sword, a martial god was cut in half before he could make a move. Swoosh! Another sword strike, and another head flew into the air. With Lin Ling's current strength, only the leader of the 9 states' 10 evils could contend with him. However, that was all. His speed is so fast. Seeing that Lin Ling's sword had taken their lives, the martial gods were shocked and exclaimed. However, the person who exclaimed was instantly killed. Killing martial gods was like chopping vegetables. Gradually, everyone felt that a nightmare had arrived. Capture those women. Then, the remaining people looked at Lin Ling. They wanted to capture Yu Yu and the others to make Lin Ling afraid. One had to admit that they were extremely sinister. However, were Yu Yu and the others weak? Yu Yu and and the others looked at each other. They sneered and attacked as well. One by one, they unleashed their divine fetuses. Xianxia activated the flipping sky seal that he had obtained from Grandfather Tang and smashed a martial god into a meat patty. Oh no! These women have divine fetuses and the divine artifacts in their hands are very fierce. The people did not expect that these delicate beauties would be so strong. Those who had wanted to take advantage of them were now so scared that their legs turned to jelly. Where did these people come from? Why are they so fierce? The 3 women have divine fetuses and divine artifacts. That young man does not seem to have any divine fetuses, but his strength is simply overwhelming. They are definitely not ordinary people. As more and more martial gods were killed, the remaining people became more and more terrified. Boy, your strength is not bad. Let me fight you. Use your full strength. Seeing that the people around him were dying, the old man finally decided to attack. A pair of bat wings sprouted from his back. His entire body was surging with demonic chi, causing the surroundings to explode continuously. His cultivation was at the peak of the martial god realm and he had 18 divine forces. No wonder he was the leader. His strength was indeed terrifying. He was even more powerful than Duan Wuhan in the past. You are not qualified to make me use my full strength. However, this strength was like a chicken or a dog to Lin Ling. Swoosh. Chapter 4183. The old man immediately sensed the fierce murderous aura and demonic aura. He was shocked and immediately unleashed all his strength. Countless black lights surrounded him and formed a huge black ball in front of him. The black ball kept spinning and emitted a power that could crush one's soul. However, when Lin Ling's sword slashed at him, the black ball that condensed all of the old man's strength was instantly slashed open. The old man who was behind the black ball had a sword mark in the middle of his head that went all the way to his legs. He looked at Lin Ling in disbelief. You are. Before he could finish his sentence, his body was torn apart from both sides. He couldn't be more dead. Who are you? However, the stinky young man continued the old man's words and looked at Lin Ling with a face full of fear. He no longer had the disdainful look from before. He was so scared that the rotten flesh on his body kept dripping off. Lin Ling's previous slash made him realize that he was no match for Lin Ling. You should be from the land of eternal slumber, right? Lin Ling held his sword and walked toward the young man step by step. The young man was surrounded by a few people as if he was being protected. However, when Lin Ling arrived, those people all moved aside and didn't dare to block his path. They didn't even think about sneaking up on him when Lin Ling walked past them. They knew that the young man's strength had reached a level that defied the natural order. If they attacked such a strong person, they would die even faster. Yes. I'm the successor of the land of eternal slumber. The young man said nervously. Back then, I heard from the Gu King that he had found a successor. It turns out that it's a piece of trash like you. How disappointing. Lin Ling stopped in front of the young man and said calmly. Gu King? You know the Gu King? Hearing that, the young man's eyes lit up. I know him. How can I not know him? Lin Ling nodded. His words made the young man happy as if he had met an acquaintance. However, Lin Ling's next sentence sent him straight to hell. It was impossible for him to recover. Gu King died in my hands. Lin Ling said indifferently. Ah, you killed the Gu King? You're lying to me. You're lying to me. Gu King is the leader of the 9 prefectures' 10 evils. No, the Gu King is indeed dead. Furthermore, he died in Spirit Light City. It is said that he was killed by the trial challenger Lin Ling. Could it be that you are trial taker Lin Ling? The young man said incoherently. Finally, he raised his head and looked at Lin Ling with even more fear in his eyes. As for the people around him, their faces were instantly filled with one emotion. Terror. Trial challenger Lin Ling. How could they not know? Not only was this expert a follower of a god, his strength had also reached a heaven-defying level. Whether it was in terms of strength or status, they were like eggs hitting a rock. Now, can you tell me what you're doing here and whose orders you're following? Lin Ling said, still looking at the young man. You won't kill me if I tell you? The young man gritted his teeth. His desire to live made him unwilling to give up any chance. Swoosh. However, just as he finished speaking, Lin Ling chopped off his head and killed him directly. Bargaining with me? Idiot. Tell me obediently. If I'm in a good mood, I might let you go. To be honest, you're not qualified to negotiate with me. Lin Ling shook his head and looked at the remaining people around him. I'll tell you. We were ordered by martial god Huan Bo, one of the top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures, to seal off Kaiyuan River. The people around him immediately scrambled to speak. Martial god Huan Bo? Hearing that, Lin Ling frowned slightly. Yes. Since the fall of martial god Qilin and martial god Wen Tian, many martial gods have risen in the 9 prefectures in an attempt to replace the top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures. Martial god Huan Bo is one of them. He has also been recognized by the other martial gods and has become one of the top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures. Sir, this is all we know. Spare our lives, spare our lives. Lin Ling was even more puzzled when he heard these voices. Although the top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures were very powerful, the wood spirit tribe of the demonic forest was no small matter either. If it wasn't necessary, martial god Huan Bo shouldn't have provoked the demonic forest. Unless martial god Huan Bo was just a pawn and had been ordered to do so. It seemed like the only way to find out the answer was to enter the demonic forest. What's the situation in the demonic forest now? Lin Ling asked again. The demonic forest is resisting tenaciously because someone pleaded for mercy on their behalf when they were about to be destroyed. Furthermore, the wood spirit tribe and the others joined that powerhouse. The person who pleaded for mercy on their behalf was a Yuan Venerate martial god. The Yuan Venerate martial god has always been alone. Now, he seems to want to develop his own force, so he has also taken a liking to the wood spirit tribe and the others. However, they are still negotiating and we don't know the outcome. However, if the Yuan Venerate martial god no longer cares about the demonic forest, then the demonic forest will be in trouble. The surrounding people all began to speak out. Scram. After obtaining the information he needed, Lin Ling didn't kill them. Although Lin Ling looked down on people who obeyed his orders obediently, he couldn't be bothered to make a move. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. Some of the surrounding martial gods kowtowed, some saluted, and some fled in terror. What a bunch of vile people. Yu and the others also walked over when they saw them flee. To them, martial gods were like gods in the sky. They had once looked up to them and envied them. However now, even these godly existences were acting lowly like lapdogs. Naturally, they despised them. After all, they definitely wouldn't beg for mercy if they fell into the hands of the enemy, let alone betray their own people. Of course, while they despised them, they also felt a little sense of accomplishment. After all, being able to make a martial god flatter Lin Ling showed how strong he was. I never imagined that a Yuan Venerate martial god would also interfere. However, the wood spirit race, the stone spirit race, and the fire spirit race are all my people. A Yuan Venerate martial god is trying to snatch them from me. Lin Ling smiled faintly as he looked at the entrance. He was the totem of the three races. How could he let anything happen to the three races? Furthermore, he couldn't let a Yuan Venerate martial god snatch them away. Then, Lin Ling led Yu and the others through the entrance. How beautiful! Yu and Xianxia, who were here for the first time, were immediately filled with curiosity as they watched the surging river flow above their heads. Lin Ling smiled but didn't interrupt them. Instead, a map appeared in his hand. This map had been given to him by Brother Wudi. It would allow Lin Ling to find the whereabouts of the demonic forest. After all, the map of the Kaiyuan River was constantly changing. This way. Then, Lin Ling made up his mind and quickened his pace with Yu and the others. Chapter 4184. Back then, when the second master of the place of eternal slumber, Wanyan Shijing, arrived, the tribes in the forest were in a terrible fix. Now that the 10 martial gods had been mobilized, the demon forest would undoubtedly be difficult to resist. However, Lin Ling was a trial taker under Lei Gong. In the 9 states, there were not many who dared to disrespect Lei Gong. Unless it was the Spirit Nation. Of course, if it was a life-and-death feud, they would not have to care about Lei Gong's face. The outcome would be to perish together with Lin Ling. After all, if Lin Ling was killed, Lei Gong would not let the matter rest. As they walked through the forest, Lin Ling saw that many tall trees had collapsed. The forest was filled with sorrow. He could not understand why someone would attack them when the 3 tribes were fighting against the world martial arts. Brother Ling, they will be fine. Sensing Lin Ling's cold expression, Yu immediately comforted him. Lin Ling nodded. According to his memories, he was getting closer and closer to where the wood spirits resided. Back then, Lin Ling had united the 3 tribes here to resist the place of eternal slumber. He remembered that Wanyan Shijing had arrived but was forced to flee with his tail between his legs. Back then, this was also where I obtained the fruit of good. At this moment, the giant ghost also floated out and sighed. This evil ghost was becoming more and more humane. Hee, this forest will belong to us from now on. At this moment, laughter came from afar. Then, a few figures walked through the dense forest, chatting as they walked. Of course, they soon discovered Lin Ling and the others and were all shocked. This was because the Kaiyuan River had been sealed. It should be impossible for anyone to enter. Who are you people? Immediately, they walked quickly toward Lin Ling and the others. Yu and the others stared at them calmly. They realized that these people were different from humans. They had long golden hair, pointed ears, and were extremely handsome. People from the Gold Spirit tribe. Instead, it was Lin Ling who recognized these people. The Gold Spirit clan was one of the 5 spirits ancient clans in the Kaiyuan River. However, the territory of the Gold Spirit clan was in the Guyuan Mountains. Now they had come to the demonic forest. You don't have the right to ask who we are. However, this demon forest is my territory. When did I agree to let you in? Lin Ling's face turned cold. Ha ha ha. Those gold spirits roared with laughter when they heard this. However, not long after they started laughing, Lin Ling's powerful aura exploded, causing them to tremble in fear. Plop. In the end, he knelt down and kowtowed continuously. With their strength, how could they withstand Lin Ling's divine might? Speak. Why are the gold spirits here? Lin Ling took a step forward and asked coldly. Those people didn't dare to hide anything and told him everything they knew. It turned out that the gold spirits and the water spirits had taken a liking to the demonic forest and invited experts to help. As a reward, those experts would receive the Tree of Tao. Lin Ling came to a realization after listening to them. However, Lin Ling was still very curious about the experts they had invited because he knew that there were 2 of the top 10 martial gods in the 9 states. Moreover, it seemed that they weren't the ones behind this. Tell the gold spirits that this is my territory. Get lost. Lin Ling shouted angrily. Then, he led Yu Yu and the others past them and toward the wood spirit tribe. Not long after, the wood spirit tribe appeared in front of them. There were tall trees and beautiful flowers. Although this place was still beautiful, it obviously lacked spirituality. Many of the wood spirit tribe's members were gathered there and their faces were gloomy. Seeing the wood spirit tribe, Lin Ling suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. Lord Messenger. It didn't take long for the members of the wood spirit clan to notice Lin Ling, and they couldn't help but be shocked. Where is the Empress? Lin Ling greeted everyone and got straight to the point. The Empress is here. However, Lord Messenger, you have to help us. They want to kill us all. Yes, although a Yuan venerate martial god has appeared to help us, it has only allowed us to escape death. However, we still have to leave our home. Lord Messenger, we don't want to leave our home. Everyone looked at Lin Ling expectantly. Lin Ling had originally intended to meet the Empress. However, after hearing their words, he stopped in his tracks and said, "Don't worry, I will protect this place." I will protect this place. It was just a simple sentence, but it filled the wood spirits with boundless confidence. Of course, some of the wood spirit tribe elders who knew the situation were still worried because they knew who was attacking the demonic forest. Those were the people of the gods. Lord Messenger. At that moment, an exclamation was heard in the sky. A huge leaf slowly drifted down with a few people on it. One of them was the Empress. The Empress was undoubtedly very excited when she saw Lin Ling. However, when she saw Yu Yu and the others, she was immediately shocked. It was no wonder that the Lord Messenger was indifferent to her beauty. It turned out that the people around him were all so beautiful. You will protect this place? That's some big talk, but in my opinion, you are just talking nonsense. There was a young man beside the Empress. At this moment, when he saw how agitated the Empress was, he was undoubtedly displeased and immediately spoke disdainfully. Who do you think you are? Do you know who is attacking the demonic forest? You will be scared to death if I tell you. You are really a frog at the bottom of a well. The young man was the first to drop the leaf as he shouted angrily. However, he had just finished speaking when a shocked voice was heard behind him. You are Lin Ling? A middle-aged man stood beside the Empress. He was a Yuan venerate martial god. At the moment, his eyes were trembling as he looked at Lin Ling as though he had seen a demon. He had also seen Lin Ling at the auction held by Taoist Myriad Treasures and had been scared away by Lin Ling's treasure. Furthermore, Lin Ling had killed 2 martial gods in a row. Thus, he was in awe of Lin Ling from the bottom of his heart. Master, who is Lin Ling? The young man couldn't help but feel puzzled when he saw the Yuan venerate martial god's shocked expression. His master was one of the 10 great martial gods of Jianghu. How could such a person know the young man in blue? That's right. I am Lin Ling. Lin Ling replied as he looked at the Yuan venerate martial god. Ah! The Yuan venerate martial god exclaimed in surprise when he heard Lin Ling's acknowledgement. He actually didn't dare approach Lin Ling. This undoubtedly made the people of the wood spirit race feel incredulous. They naturally knew who a Yuan venerate martial god was. He was powerful and famous. Even the invaders had to give him some face. Otherwise, the 3 races of the demonic forest would have been wiped out a long time ago. However, Such a powerhouse actually didn't dare approach the Lord Messenger? Chapter 4185. This guy? The Yuan Venerate martial god was stunned when he heard this. Then he flew into a rage. The disciple he had just accepted had actually called Lin Ling this guy? He rushed forward and, under the confused gaze of the young man, suddenly grabbed his neck and smashed him to the ground. Apologize to me. Bang, bang, bang. The Yuan Venerate martial god grabbed the youth and kowtowed to Lin Ling, causing the youth to vomit blood continuously. Lin Ling, this disciple of mine is insensible. I hope you don't take it to heart. The Yuan Venerate martial god then spoke to Lin Ling. Yes, I'm sorry. The youth's face was covered in blood, but he wasn't a fool. As he spoke, he kept spitting out broken teeth. It's fine. I don't have any objections to him. Lin Ling remained indifferent to the Yuan Venerate martial god's actions. He only replied indifferently. His words made the Yuan Venerate martial god relax. He knew that Lin Ling didn't care about his disciple's mistakes. However, I do have some objections to you. However, Lin Ling's next words made the Yuan Venerate martial god's heart skip a beat. The demonic forest is my territory and I'm protecting it. I heard that you were snatching my people, right? Lin Ling played with his fingernails as he spoke casually. I really didn't know about this. The Yuan Venerate martial god's hair stood on end as he explained immediately. In the end, he even gave himself 3 hard slaps. Lin Ling, it's my fault. I didn't know that this was your territory. I didn't recognize you when I tried to snatch people from you. It's my fault. The crisp sound of a slap rang out, causing the wood spirits to be dumbfounded. They had no idea what was going on. However, they weren't fools. They immediately guessed that the status of the Great Envoy was higher than the Yuan Venerate martial god. Great Envoy! The Empress also looked at Lin Ling excitedly. Last time, Lin Ling had saved their devil forest. This time, Lin Ling had come to save the devil forest once again. Lin Ling was worthy of being their envoy. Lin Ling, you also know that my island is very big, but there aren't many people. Right now, these 3 races are about to be killed, so I'm pleading for mercy on their behalf. I want to bring them to my island to increase their popularity. That's all. The Yuan Venerate martial god explained after giving himself 3 slaps. Then his eyes lit up. Furthermore, I also saved them. That's why I'm giving you a chance to speak. Lin Ling nodded. Then he said calmly, tell me, who's having designs on the demon forest? It's a trial taker of a god. The Yuan Venerate martial god said immediately. As expected. Lin Ling's eyes lit up. In fact, he had already guessed that this was the case. After all, the other party had to have a powerful background to be able to summon so many powerhouses. So, how's your discussion going? Lin Ling asked again. The trial taker only wants the Great Path Tree, and this tree is in the Devil Forest. Therefore, after my pleading, they let the 3 races off. However, the 3 races want to leave the Devil Forest. The Yuan Venerate martial god said. What a trial taker. Are you a bandit? Lin Ling's face turned cold. He didn't care what kind of trial taker the other party was. In any case, this was Lin Ling's territory. There was no way they could get their hands on it. The Yuan Venerate martial god heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Lin Ling's domineering voice. It seemed like Lin Ling didn't mind his mistake. Then, he realized that there was finally some way to resolve the matter of the 3 great races. After all, Lin Ling of the heavenly voice of the god was going to make an appearance. This was a god who had seen gods before, a god who possessed supreme authority. However, when I spoke with them last time, they said that they wouldn't show any respect to anyone who came. Then, the Yuan Venerate martial god pondered for a moment before speaking again. His tone was warm and gentle as he tried to sow discord. Lin Ling naturally heard the provocation. However, he didn't mind. Instead, he said nonchalantly, no matter who it is, they will have to show respect to me. Yuan Venerate martial god, I will give you a chance to redeem yourself. Lead the way. All right. The Yuan Venerate martial god couldn't help but smile excitedly when he heard this. Although he was one of the 10 great martial gods of Zhou, this was a confrontation between trial takers. He couldn't afford to provoke either side. Unless he didn't fear the gods. Therefore, he could also follow along and watch the confrontation between the trial takers. Follow Sir Envoy. Upon seeing that Lin Ling had made a decision, the people of the wood spirit race also shouted one after another. The Empress was both excited and shocked. She was excited because Sir Envoy had returned. She was shocked because, based on Sir Envoy's tone, he didn't seem to be afraid of those powerhouses. She had never imagined that Lin Ling would actually grow to such a level after being separated from Lin Ling for a few years. This was because she knew very well just how incredible it was to be feared by the 9 states' 10 great martial gods. Moreover, there were such figures among those powerhouses. However, Lin Ling was also such a figure. The large group followed Lin Ling and advanced through the dense forest. Inform the fire spirit race and the earth spirit race. Along the way, the Empress also spoke to the people of her race. Those people understood and ran happily through the forest. After a long time, the people of the fire spirit race and the earth spirit race arrived. Without any suspense, they were extremely excited. Sir Totem. The patriarch of the fire spirit race knelt down immediately. Whine, whine, whine. The dwarves of the earth spirit race also knelt down. However, this group of dwarves also looked at Lin Ling anxiously. Lin Ling immediately scolded them jokingly and threw away the wine on his body. Over the years, he had already developed a habit of collecting fine wine from all over as long as he had the chance. He had never imagined that it would come in handy today. When the Yuan Venerate martial gods saw that the 3 great races were very familiar with Lin Ling, he immediately knew that it was impossible for him to recruit the 3 great races. Continue leading the way. Lin Ling didn't stay here for too long. He let the Yuan Venerate martial god continue leading the way. Lin Ling was also very curious as to which trial taker had interfered in his territory. As they passed through the mountains, they finally saw a large luxurious mansion located in the distance when they were close to the ancient Yuan mountain range. It was obvious that these mansions had been built not long ago. However, they had everything they needed. They were magnificent and majestic. Furthermore, the martialists strolling around nearby were all martial gods. They were obviously extremely famous people in Jianghu. Based on their obedient appearance, this also indicated the trial taker's identity. If the 4 great gods were compared to emperors, then the trial taker would be the chief general. Of course, he had to be at the level of the divine heavenly voice. Ordinary trial takers still weren't valued. After all, the divine heavenly voice was something that could allow one to meet the gods. Lin Ling, we have arrived. I will go and talk to them. After all, I just saw the trial taker 3 days ago. I reckon he is still here. Chapter 4186. Their disdainful smiles deepened when they saw the Yuan Venerate martial god. This Yuan Venerate martial god was pleading for mercy? He was simply overestimating himself. May I ask if Sir Black Flag is here? The Yuan Venerate martial god asked with cupped fists. He was also a little depressed. He was one of the 10 great martial gods of Jianghu, a powerhouse with high standards. Now, he had to lower his voice before these weak martialists. This was too depressing. Yuan Venerate martial god, Sir Black Flag has already given you a lot of face. Now, you still want to plead for mercy? Let me give you a word of advice. Scram. An old man with a goatee said nonchalantly. His attitude was extremely arrogant. The Yuan Venerate martial god cursed silently when he saw this. Spiritual Master Goat, I do have an important matter to discuss with him. I already said scram. The old man called Spiritual Master Goat snorted. You should know that Sir Black Flag has already given you a lot of face. If you continue to pester him, Sir Black Flag's promise to you might fall through. Boom. However, as soon as he said this, a fist flew over from afar at an extremely fast speed. Bang! When it landed on the old man's head, it exploded like a watermelon. The entire process was straightforward and simple. This unforeseen event immediately made the powerhouses in front of the mansion feel as if they were facing a great enemy. The Yuan Venerate martial god was flabbergasted and in disbelief. After all, the person standing in front of him was Lin Ling. What's the point of wasting time with them? Lin Ling shook off the blood on his hand as he spoke coldly to the Yuan Venerate martial god. His words made the Yuan Venerate martial god's jaw drop. He was shocked by Lin Ling's domineering attitude. However, a carefree feeling arose spontaneously soon after. He had also lowered his voice for a long time. Damn it, This was the first time he felt so refreshed. Then. What should we do next? The Yuan Venerate martial god asked nervously. Are you an idiot? Lin Ling glanced at the Yuan Venerate martial god strangely. We are here to look for someone, not to reminisce about the past, nor to plead for mercy. If anyone dares to talk nonsense, just beat them up. This sentence made the Yuan Venerate martial god wake up from a dream. That's right. He followed Lin Ling. Why did he have to plead for mercy like a dog? At once, he straightened, his back stiffened and roared thunderously. Sir, come out here. The Yuan Venerate martial god's attitude was insufferably arrogant, as if he was venting all his frustrations over the past few days. Yuan Venerate martial god, you. These powerhouses were furious. How could Yuan Venerates and martial gods of the past be so arrogant? Whoosh! The Yuan Venerate martial god did not waste any more words. He lunged forward and his arm turned into a rock. He grabbed a powerhouse and smashed him into the ground. Boom! After smashing down, a black rock appeared out of thin air and suppressed the expert, causing him to vomit blood more than 10 meters away. Actually, the strongest martialist present was a Yuan Venerate martial god. Even Lin Ling couldn't compare to him. It was just that Lin Ling's status was higher. After suppressing that powerhouse, the Yuan Venerate martial god was elated as he glared angrily at everyone. With a martial god backing him, he could do things without the slightest scruple. Great. Upon seeing the Yuan Venerate martial god's insufferably arrogant attitude, the powerhouses didn't dare be arrogant anymore. Who are you? At this moment, a figure walked out of the mansion's door. This person looked very young, about 30 years old, but his strength was not weak. He was martial god Ripple Illusion, one of the 10 new martial gods in JoJo. He immediately squinted at the Yuan Venerate martial god when he walked out. He didn't understand why the latter was so bold. Damn you! Ask Sir Black Flag to come out here. However, the Yuan Venerate martial god clearly wasn't afraid of him this time. Haha! Is Sir Black Flag someone you can meet whenever you want? I'll give you a chance. Get lost immediately. Martial god Ripple Illusion sneered. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Lin Ling's voice was heard. Yuan Venerate martial god. Can you capture him? Yes. The Yuan Venerate martial god nodded instinctively and turned to look at Lin Ling. When he saw Lin Ling nod, he immediately understood and erupted with his full power. The ferocious speed, the unparalleled power of divinity, and the divine embryo all surged forward in a mighty wave. Boom! When this aura was unleashed, the mansion behind was the first to explode and turn into dust. The strength of a Yuan Venerate martial god was terrifying. The surrounding martialists were also blown away by this violent storm. Martial god Ripple Illusion had clearly not expected that a Yuan Venerate martial god would dare to attack him. This was rebellion. Could a Yuan Venerate martial god dare to go against a martial god? Unfortunately, although he was also one of the 10 great martial gods in JoJo, he was still a new martial god and his strength couldn't compare to a Yuan Venerate martial god. Furthermore, the Yuan Venerate martial god had attacked suddenly. This could be considered a sneak attack. Thus, in a short moment, he was sealed by the mysterious stone and turned into a 2-meter-tall divine stone. Only his head was exposed. He resisted with all his might, but it was useless. At the same time, Lin Ling's eyes lit up. The strength of a Yuan Venerate martial god was indeed terrifying. He had a feeling that even if he used all his strength, he might not be a match for a Yuan Venerate martial god unless he used a treasure to suppress him. However, he had never imagined that a Yuan Venerate martial god would be so cowardly despite being so strong. He would actually be so afraid of him and the other trial takers. However, Lin Ling quickly recalled that this Yuan Venerate martial god had also been like this back at the Guyuan mountain range. This was a well-prepared powerhouse who had endured humiliation all his life. Thus, there was more or less some cowardice in the depths of his character. Swoosh! Lin Ling rushed forward and arrived before the divine stone. Following which, he viciously threw 3 slaps at it. You dare to act so arrogantly in my territory? Slap! 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 Martial god Ripple Illusion had been restrained by the Yuan Venerate martial god and could only endure Lin Ling's 3 palm strikes. And he was also beaten silly. You! Who are you? You must have a death wish. Martial god Ripple Illusion roared furiously. He had never imagined that he, one of the 10 great martial gods of the 9 states, would actually be slapped in the face. You are indeed one of the 10 great martial gods of the 9 states. You are very strong. Even your skin is thicker than others. Lin Ling ignored his words. Instead, he waved his numb palm and took out his scabbard. Then, he swung it at martial god Ripple Illusion's face as though he was holding the leg of a chair. Bang! A dull sound was heard. Martial god Ripple Illusion's nose was smashed crooked and he spat out a mouthful of blood. This scared the surrounding martial gods so much that they started trembling. Who exactly was this person? He was simply too arrogant. Furthermore, this was because Lin Ling had used the scabbard. If he had used the Tyrant Song Sword, the restrained martial god Ripple Illusion might have been killed immediately. Trial taker Lin Ling. What is the meaning of this? A figure finally leaped out of the crumbling mansion and appeared before Lin Ling's eyes. This person's strength was also unfathomable. However, there was also a sword-like sea urchin radiating from his body. This was a divine might. Chapter 4187. Trial Challenger Lin Ling? Martial god Huan Bo's eyes narrowed at Huang Xiaolong's words. Everyone else's jaws dropped to the floor. So this frivolous and unruly young man was a trial challenger. No wonder he was so unbridled. Who are you? Lin Ling slowly sheathed his tyrannical song sword and asked nonchalantly when he saw the newcomer. Lin Ling had never seen this young man before, nor did he expect the other party to recognize him. I'm Youjin's 4-star trial challenger, Wangu Yanhui. The young man puffed out his chest proudly and said nonchalantly, Lin Ling, why did you disrupt my trial mission? You should know that disrupting other people's trial mission is equivalent to provoking a god. Trial mission? Lin Ling was inwardly surprised, then sneered. What trial mission is this? Looking for the world will in the Kai Yuan River. Wangu Yanhui immediately answered. The world will in the Kai Yuan River? Lin Ling naturally knew where it was. It was at the Dragon Clan's side. He had once communicated with that world will. The world will was on the other side of the Kai Yuan River. But this Wangu Yanhui's gaze was on the Devil Forest. Obviously, he was using the trial mission as an excuse to run amok. Bullshit. Thinking of this, Lin Ling snapped angrily. First, who said others can't interfere with the trial mission? Did you say that? Or did Eugene say that? This was the truth. Other trial challengers were not prohibited from participating in the trial mission. In fact, there were times when trial challengers would fight to the death just for a single mission. When Lin Ling went to the Spirit Light City as a scout, he was doing the same mission with Longyang and the others. Therefore, there was no such thing as not interfering. Second, this is my territory. You're behaving atrociously in my territory. Do you think I can just stand by and watch? Lin Ling repeated. Wangu Yanhui gritted his teeth, knowing that Lin Ling was right. Indeed, senior apprentice sister Lu Li had said that Lin Ling was very difficult to deal with. Seeing it today, it was indeed so. It was obvious that he and Lu Li Empress were both gods. All right, you're right. However, are you really going to go against me for the sake of the demonic forest? Wangu Yanhui spoke again. Go against you? You think too highly of yourself. Let me tell you, this devil forest is under the protection of I. Lin Ling. Whoever dares to mess around here will be going against me. Lin Ling. Lin Ling stepped forward with an overbearing aura. Huang Xiaolong could tell that although Wangu Yanhui was a trial challenger, Wangu Yanhui's strength was lower than his. All right, I will report this matter to Lei Gong and let him convict you. This is because you actually provoked other trial takers for no reason. Watching Lin Ling's momentum climbing higher and higher, Wangu Yanhui's anger soared once again. However, he didn't dare to make a move. If he did, it would be equivalent to provoking the lightning god Great Hall. Hee, you're talking big. May I ask, what star-level trial challenger are you now? Listening to Wangu Yanhui's words, Lin Ling suddenly thought of something and immediately mocked. Didn't you say you're a 4-star cultivator? A guy who hasn't even seen a god realm cultivator. You can see Lei Gong? You must be dreaming. Lin Ling's last sentence left Wangu Yanhui speechless. Wangu Yanhui's body trembled uncontrollably because Lin Ling was also mocking him, Wangu Yanhui, as trash. Yo, Lin Ling, why are you bullying some newcomers? But at this time, 2 figures slowly approached from the distant sky. Judging from the direction they were coming from, They seemed to be coming from the ancient Origin Mountains. Looking closer, they had a divine might similar to a sea urchin. Clearly, they were also trial challengers. No one had expected that 4 trial challengers would gather in the demonic Origin Forest today. Lin Ling also looked up and immediately discovered that one of them was wearing a long black robe. Even his shoes were black. It was extremely strange. However, this person was very strong and wasn't much weaker than a Yuan Venerate martial god. Come to think of it, this person should be the black flag that the Yuan Venerate martial god had mentioned. Furthermore, he was also the person with the greatest authority here. The other person was someone Lin Ling was familiar with. It was Lei Gong's trial challenger, Zhong Shan. When Lin Ling had gone to Lei Gong's hall and walked up the sea god's stairway, it had been Zhong Shan who had led the way and introduced the rules of Lei Gong's hall. To Lin Ling, Zhong Shan was a good friend. However, Zhong Shan's appearance here undoubtedly surprised Lin Ling. Of course, Zhong Shan was also very surprised as he exclaimed, "Lin Ling, what are you doing here?" As these words faded, Heike turned his head to look at Zhong Shan in astonishment. Clearly, he did not expect Zhong Shan to know Lin Ling. Although there were only 40 trial challengers below the 4 great gods, this didn't mean that everyone knew each other. "Big brother Black Flag, this person is disrespectful to me." Wangu Yanhui immediately spoke up when he saw Black Flag arrive. Clearly, Black Flag's status and strength were above Wangu Yanhui's. Black Flag squinted at Lin Ling. He naturally knew about Lin Ling's name. This was someone who had embarrassed senior sister Lioli. He had heard of such a person before. However, after meeting him today, he realized that Lin Ling didn't live up to his reputation. He was as domineering as the rumors said. "Lin Ling, this is our business. What's the meaning of this?" Black Flag said nonchalantly. Then he glanced at his residence, which had been reduced to dust, and added, "You destroyed our residence. Aren't you being too arrogant by doing this?" This fellow lacks manners, so I decided to teach him a lesson. However, Lin Ling wasn't afraid at all as he spoke nonchalantly with his hands behind his back. His frivolous attitude made the Yuan Venerate martial god admire him. Lin Ling wasn't strong, but his guts were ferocious. Previously, he had been afraid that Lin Ling would weaken when he saw Black Flag. If that had happened, even though Black Flag wouldn't have done anything to Lin Ling, the Yuan Venerate martial god would have been unlucky and would have made things difficult for him in the future. Fortunately, Lin Ling was still as arrogant as before. At the very least, Black Flag wouldn't look at the Yuan Venerate martial god anymore. Even if someone needs to be taught a lesson, it should be our god. What right do you have? Black Flag had never imagined that Lin Ling would be so arrogant and not give him any face at all. Right. Upon hearing this, Lin Ling smirked. "I am a heavenly voice of God, while he is a 4-star trial taker that even the gods have never seen before. Is this considered a right?" "It is." Black Flag nodded. "Does this mean that I would also have the right to teach you a lesson if my level was higher than yours?" Black Flag was clearly a heavenly voice of God. He was a powerhouse that had seen Eugene before. "All right, then may I ask what star trial taker you are?" Lin Ling nodded immediately. "Sorry, I'm a 7-star. Black Flag didn't hide anything as he replied nonchalantly. He also wanted to see Lin Ling's terrified expression after he said this. After all, a 7-star trial taker was an extremely noble status. Being able to reach this level meant that he had completed many missions and was valued by the gods. Chapter 4188. I'm sorry, but I'm also a 7-star. Looking at Heike's smug expression, Lin Ling said word by word. "What?" As soon as he said that, the 3 trial takers' eyes narrowed. Lin Ling was the trial taker with the fastest growth rate among the 4 gods. At such a young age, he already had the heavenly voice of God. They had long been envious of him. But now, Lin Ling had become a 7-star trial taker? If that was the case, it would be impossible for Heike to show his status in front of Lin Ling. Heike couldn't help but turn to look at Zhong Shan. He wanted to know from Zhong Shan whether Lin Ling was bragging. However, Zhong Shan was also confused. He remembered that Lin Ling was only a 6-star trial taker before he left. Therefore, Zhong Shan frowned and asked, "Lin Ling, are you sure you're a 7-star trial taker? Could it be that someone dares to make a joke about a god?" Lin Ling asked. His words made the 3 trial takers fall silent. Indeed, No matter how arrogant a trial taker was, he wouldn't dare to make a joke about a god. Since Lin Ling dared to say that, he must be really confident. I'll give you a chance. Scram. Seeing that they were silent, Lin Ling also ordered them to leave. Lin Ling, why do you have to do this? We're all trial takers. Why don't we each take a step back? There's no need to offend Heike and the others. Scram. At this moment, Zhongshan frowned and said, how about giving me face? Scram. Brother Zhongshan, I'm giving you face. That's why I'm being so nice. Lin Ling looked at Zhongshan indifferently and said, you should know that this demonic forest is my territory. If a trial taker dares to run amok in my territory, do you think I can stand by and do nothing? Therefore, he's the one offending me now, not the other way around. Scram. Hearing this, Zhongshan was enraged. This was because He Qi and Wangu Yanhui were both looking at him, and Lin Ling had met the gods later than him. Therefore, if he couldn't even deal with Lin Ling, he wouldn't be able to swallow his pride. With this thought in mind, Zhongshan's voice also became solemn. Lin Ling, no matter what, I am the one who brought you to Lei Gong's Great Hall. You must give me this face no matter what. He remembered that Lin Ling was very easy to talk to in the Lei Gong Hall, so his dignified appearance should be able to scare Lin Ling. However, he didn't know that Lin Ling was easy to talk to, but that depended on the time. At this moment, Lin Ling didn't give anyone face because this had already violated Lin Ling's principles. Moreover, if he, Zhongshan, walked around the 9 prefectures in the final world and asked for Lin Ling's name, everyone would say that this Lin Ling wasn't easy to talk to. Brother Zhongshan, you brought me to Lei Gong's Great Hall last time, so I will give you face. At this moment, Lin Ling looked indifferently at Zhongshan and said. These words made Zhongshan smile with satisfaction, but Lin Ling wasn't done yet. I will give you face, so I will call you Brother Zhongshan for the rest of my life. If you still want to go against me, then don't blame me for not being polite to you. With the last sentence, Lin Ling's voice was so cold that it penetrated one's heart. You dare. Hearing this, Zhongshan was furious. How dare a latecomer be so arrogant? Although Lei Gong valued Lin Ling a little, in Zhongshan's opinion, Lin Ling was just lucky to be chosen by Lei Gong. Sooner or later, he would return to his original state. In the past, Zhongshan was polite to Lin Ling on the surface, but in fact, he was already dissatisfied with Lin Ling. Therefore, he wanted to take advantage of the time when Lin Ling left the Lei Gong's Great Hall to plot against Lin Ling. However, Lin Ling always disappeared too quickly, causing his plan to fail. It seems like Zhongshan, you are bent on going against me. Lin Ling was also angry. Of course, he would give face to Zhongshan. However, Zhongshan didn't know how to conduct himself. He, Lin Ling, had already made it clear that the demon forest was under his protection. If Zhongshan wanted to give face to him, he should have advised He Qi, not him, Lin Ling. It was as if Zhongshan didn't help his own people when they were being bullied at home. Instead, he bullied his own family. Let me tell you, if you don't scram after the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, don't blame me for taking action. Lin Ling issued his final order. He Qi and the others' faces turned cold. This Lin Ling was too arrogant. He didn't give them any face at all. However, when they thought of Lin Ling's identity, they didn't dare to act recklessly. After all, angering Lin Ling wasn't a big deal, but angering Lei Gong would be troublesome. You have guts. Mountains and rivers will meet again. Don't fall into my hands. He Qi stared at Lin Ling and said word by word. Obviously, he had no choice but to retreat now. Wait! But at this time, Wangu Yanhui shouted. He looked at Lin Ling and said, Lin Ling, this matter is between you and me. Why don't we settle it, using the simplest method of a cultivator to fight? If you win, this devil essence forest will belong to you, and we will never step into it again. If I win, the demon forest will belong to me. What do you think? Of course, you can also choose not to fight. However, if the dignified Tianyin of the 7-star god is afraid of a newcomer, your reputation will be tarnished. Of course you, Lin Ling, might not care, but Lei Gong's side won't be able to say anything. In the mission, there must be something fishy going on. That's why you, Lin Ling, soared to the heavens in one step and became a 7-star god. Wangu Yanhui's voice was filled with provocation. Hearing Wangu Yanhui's words, He Qi and Zhongshan sneered. Lin Ling was a 7-star cultivator, but in fact, they still doubted the authenticity of that claim. If Lin Ling didn't even dare to battle Wangu Yanhui, then the 2-word 7-star would be an undeserved reputation. Do you dare or not? Wangu Yanhui's aura became overbearing when he saw Lin Ling's silence. Seeing this, a cold light flickered in Lin Ling's eyes. These people had turned the demon forest upside down, yet he, Lin Ling, only asked them to scram. This was already giving them enough face. However, this Wangu Yanhui was still unwilling to give up. Did he really think that he, Lin Ling, was an easy target to bully? As you wish. At this point, it was impossible for Lin Ling to refuse. Straightforward. Wangu Yanhui was not surprised by Lin Ling's nod. After all, he guessed that it was fine for Lin Ling to lose face, but he did not dare to make Lei Gong lose face as well. Let's go over there. Wangu Yanhui took the lead, flying towards the ancient Yuan mountain range's sky. He Qi and Zhongshan also sneered coldly and flew away. Zhongshan, how is this Lin Ling's strength? His talent is not bad, he has 2 divine embryos, but his cultivation realm is not high, and his divine force is not strong. He might be powerful against other martial god realm masters, but against us who are also martial god realm cultivators, his strength is weaker. I estimate that the gap between Wangu Yanhui and Lin Ling's strength is not too big. Wangu Yanhui is only a little bit stronger. After all, according to the time, they should be the same batch of cultivators. It's just that Lin Ling's luck was good, and he did some mission that caused his cultivation to soar.